Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And like the lady said, welcome, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, and scriptards, I guess. This
Always
is
welcome.
Episode 24 of Brothers of the Serpent. This is the place where we try to put pyramids in every conversation.
After this show, we will have done 2 solid days of podcasting.
That's right. 24 shows, 48 hours of mind-expanding content.
That's right.
So if your mind is expanded 30% every show, how big is your brain after 24 shows?
Same size.
That's right.
Just,
Same size.
Just bigger mind.
That's right. So we have some interesting information. Like I've continued to research the pendulum stuff, and I was finally able to find out what exactly the nature of the anomaly that is seen during the eclipse is. And it's so wherever you are on the Earth, when you've got the pendulum going, there's the rotation of the planet is causing the pendulum to rotate also, unless you're at the equator.
Right.
So during the eclipse, what the guy saw basically was that this effect, that whatever was causing the thing to turn, the pendulum to turn, was massively increased during the period of the eclipse. So like there's a graph, and we can put this in the show notes. There's a graph where you see the period of the pendulum, and then like during the 2 hours of the eclipse, it just climbs way up. I mean, it's like almost quadruples the amount
Of rotation.
Yeah, of
Right.
the amount that the pendulum rotates.
So in other words, like if they...
So that kind of makes it seem like it's not the rotation of the Earth that's actually causing the pendulum to do this.
Well, when I'm trying to get this straight, like if they say we're swinging the pendulum in an area where it takes 5 days to fully make a full
Yeah.
rotation,
Okay.
and then an eclipse goes overhead, it's going to take far less than 5 days because it rotates a lot further during
because,
the eclipse.
During the 2 hours of the eclipse, it will basically turn 4 times as fast or something like that as it does normally.
So is this because when you were reading the articles before, you were talking about how they were saying not everyone got this same anomaly, but they got other anomalies.
Right.
So what are the...
Yeah. There's an article from NASA that they basically list every single study that has been done with pendulums and eclipses, like that are specifically looking for this, and they tell you at the top yes or no, did it get this effect? Most of them did get the effect. The ones that didn't get the effect got other things that were, in other words, it didn't explain it totally because they had the abstracts, but basically it was saying that like the pendulum was not acting normally. It just
Right.
wasn't specifically this effect that they saw, and it's not clear why.
And they weren't very clear on what the effect was that
Right.
they did see.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, it took me a while to find out what the actual effect that he saw was, and like
The
his
original
graph
guy.
his graph is badass. It's like I want to know what he was using though, because it doesn't. How do you
bob.
a plumb bob? Like, how do you do it? How do you think you do it? You've got this thing swinging. How are you measuring how much it turns? How much its axis turns every swing? Like, what would he be using to do that? Because it was graphed out like it was on a computer.
Yeah. GMA's company GraphTech,
Yeah,
they could do that.
probably.
Because
you put sensors underneath the floor of it. And it's like, whoop, whoop.
But they set up cameras to like watch for
yeah.
very minute changes in things. So he could probably...
It's all Matrix style. So
Yeah, so I mean, like if they built a camera on a track
Yeah.
that went around the pendulum, they could keep it in line with the pendulum and then record like how far
see.
it turns over a period of time.
yeah, that's cool.
That would be cool.
And it apparently didn't matter how long the cable was, how heavy the weight was. It didn't matter. The effect was the same. And again, so like the idea, the conventional idea is that the reason the pendulum turns is because of the Earth's rotation, but that should mean that an eclipse doesn't affect it.
Because when you're doing it at either the North or the South Pole, the pendulum doesn't actually turn. It's the Earth that's turning around the pendulum.
By the way, Brett says that after 24 shows with 30% expansion each show, your brain would be 54,280% expanded. So that's pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, that's all right. We're gonna have to increase that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to keep making shows, man. We're getting there.
We need to expand it by 1,000,000%.
That's right. Not gonna be happy until it's 1,000,000. So yeah, so if it, the moon blocking the sun should not have any effect on a pendulum that's just being affected by the rotation of the Earth.
You know, it'd be like, I don't know why I just thought of this, but thinking of the pendulum at the North Pole, like it'd be crazy to watch an eclipse at the North Pole. Yeah, because the sun would just like go all the way around you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, not all the way around you during the eclipse, but
right.
It wouldn't be
the sun.
Yeah, it would just be strange.
The sun sets only when the high side is over, right? Because the Earth's axis is tilted. So if you're at the North Pole, the sun will be set when it's like when the axis is pointing away from it or whatever.
Right, in the winter time basically is when the sun sets.
Right.
And in the summertime, it doesn't.
Well, no, I think it'll basically drift up and down.
So in the summer solstice at the North Pole, it doesn't actually set.
Doesn't set at all.
No,
it goes down.
It just goes across the sky in like a wave pattern.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. Because the pole will be pointing towards it, so it'll be like, yeah, sweet. So what does the moon look like? Is it
actually? It's not really a wave pattern. It would pretty much be the same level if you were right at the North Pole. It would stay at the same level, and then you would start to notice it going up and down as you move.
Right, it would look like it was going like this
into winter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have a 20-degree tilt or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to watch an eclipse from there.
Yeah. And it would always kind of be at the horizon, right?
It's pretty low in the sky. So
it's always dusk.
So the idea that you have the pendulum going at the pole, and the pendulum is like, let's say you pulled the pendulum back and you let it go directly at the sun. As you watched it make its quote unquote full turn, it would just always be swinging towards the sun.
Right. It's decoupled from the Earth. Yeah.
Right. So it would be interesting to see if this same effect would happen if there was a solar eclipse on the North Pole. Like, what would happen? Would the pendulum start swinging in a different direction away from the sun?
Yeah.
Because apparently it's like on the pole, it never actually changed direction. Like he said, it was fixed to the distant.
Right, to the distant stars. Yeah.
Right.
That's why it's decoupled from the Earth completely. Yeah.
Right. And which makes sense.
Right.
Really. That makes sense.
I don't think there can be an eclipse at the pole, though. I don't think. I don't know if it can the moon.
If the moon, I don't know either.
Yeah, because I mean, like it's got this narrow path of this band.
Right, and it probably can't.
Yeah,
but the damn it, that sucks. So we need to push the moon in the way. Push the moon up there. Yeah, I think the moon is like, it has a tilt. Its orbital tilt is like 6 degrees off of the ecliptic.
Yeah,
I think
the ecliptic of the sun. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't follow our equator,
right?
But it's not quite on the ecliptic of the sun either.
Right.
It's sort of in between them.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look that up. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't think that you can have a solar eclipse up there. Actually, I won't have to look that up because we have an official show observer who should be doing his job right now. I can see that he's typing something
already. Yes.
Okay, so it's 5.15 degrees off the ecliptic. I thought it was. Oh, to the plane of the Earth. Yes. That's the ecliptic. Yeah, to the plane of the Earth's orbit.
That's right. So other astronomical things that are interesting, like, and some of you may have seen these articles that come out every couple of years, and they announce that there's some massive planetary body way out there past Pluto. They're like, they keep finding all these dwarf planets. They call them dwarf planets. Like they've got Sedna and I can never remember any of the names of them, but there's a whole bunch of them. They call them trans-Neptunian objects.
Sweet.
TNOs. So Pluto is considered one. It's a trans-Neptunian object. And they're all little dwarf planets. However they decide that it's not big enough to be a real planet. That's racist or whatever. But I think there's at least 4 or 5 of them out there that they found. There may be more, but the point is that like they see these planets and they notice that so Eris, that's right, Ceres is one, Sedna, and Sedna's weird because it looks red. I don't know how to say that. Maki. Benkyo. Haumea. Is that right? Yeah. So they keep seeing that all these little dwarf planets or whatever are being affected by some other massive body out there. Something with a lot of gravity. And then they noticed this with Pluto. Like when the way they found Pluto initially was that they saw these wobbles in Neptune and Uranus's orbit around the sun. They kept seeing these wobbles, and they were like, so they figured there must be something else farther out there that has gravity. So they started to look, and then they discovered Pluto. But Pluto's not big enough, so they keep looking, and they keep finding Pluto type objects that are not big enough to cause these wobbles. And so every couple of years they come out with an article that's like, yeah, there's like a very large planetary, like a gas giant. Maybe it's, many times the size of Earth. Could be a brown dwarf star, like a failed star. And so basically that would put the sun in an orbit around it. Like it would have a huge elliptical orbit, but the sun would also be in orbit around. The sun would orbit a common center with that object, because it would extend so far out in the solar system in one direction that it would drag the center of the solar system away from the sun.
Right.
So the sun would begin to orbit that common center. So what's interesting about that is this is probably going to be the accepted model for what causes precession at this point. I can't remember what they were saying exactly, but when I was reading the article, they were saying that the wobble of the Earth's axis, like that theory for what was causing precession, they came up with that when they still didn't know that or didn't take into account the idea that the solar system actually moved.
Yeah.
Okay. So they were saying it doesn't really fit with the dynamics of cosmology anymore. So,
I've been thinking about that too. Originally, I was thinking based on a spinning top. Like when you spin the top,
yeah,
it will always have it may have a period where it's stable,
right?
But after a while, it'll start to wobble, and the wobble is always
retrograde.
A precess. Yeah, it's the opposite direction,
right?
It's counter direct, spin of the spin of the top. But the problem with that is that it's in, like, the gravitational field force is down with the top.
Yeah.
That's not the case with
That's right.
Earth.
It's not the same, yeah.
So the idea of precession is that
you're saying you're saying it's a long axis balanced on the southern
right
pole.
and so the bottom of the top, the south pole of the top, doesn't have a wobble at all.
Yeah, or sometimes it does, and you can watch it draw little circles.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It can do that.
Yeah.
But it's
the top part of it's much more pronounced, yeah.
Okay, so I am wrong about that. It does have a wobble on the bottom.
Yeah.
But it just seemed odd to me, like when I started to think about, if you spin a top in space, it doesn't do this.
Right. And there's no friction.
Maybe. I don't know. I've never done that. But
yeah, it's like, you're right, because what would cause that kind of periodic thing or whatever is because it's resting on that point.
Right, and the pull is down.
Right.
Whereas the pull of Earth is
right. It's all towards the center, and it's not resting on any point of its
and
axis.
also the pull of the sun is
yeah, that's right.
off to the side.
And they were actually saying that the reason their model of the wobble of the Earth's axis was caused by the moon, not so.
And that would be difficult to figure out too, because the moon has its offset. It has an elliptical orbit around us, and then it's tilted a little bit more, and then we're tilted, and then it's got its own tilt for its spin, and it's just like,
that's right.
Try to look into that stuff. Like, okay, wait, I would like to look up Oracle.
Yeah,
tell me how
decoupled imploded spherical geometry.
Tell me how the moon works.
It's just like
it's like so much shit. I'm like, oh my god, I can't even.
I can't even.
Yeah, I can't even. I can't even, bro.
Oh my God, I can't even. Yeah, I know about that.
It's too much. I got to figure out what the Earth's doing. And
That's right.
And then maybe later, no.
Once you realize that what the moon's doing is drawing this intricate, like tapestry on the Earth, that weave that it draws. You know, you look at that and you're like, yeah, too much.
Yeah, and it's got its axial tilt,
Yeah.
and then it's got its whole orbit is also skewed a little bit. Plus, it's elliptical, so it's closer to us sometimes, and further away from us sometimes.
And it has apogee and perigee too, like
Yeah.
the Earth. Like the supermoon is when it's the closest on its
Right.
Yeah.
And all that shit, and you're just like, dude, no, this is I'm too old to start.
That's right. It doesn't matter. All that stuff is like very interesting for like the bean counters and button sorters, but like the large effects, you know, like the tides, those things don't matter on all those little weaving orbits.
I don't know.
You know,
knowing the more details you know,
it's like
the more shit you can predict.
It's like chaos, the chaos stuff. You know, the butterfly flaps its wings and it starts a hurricane on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a hurricane on the other side of the world and it doesn't even move the butterfly.
Yeah, that's true. It moves a butterfly 10,000 years from now.
Right. That's right. Buried catastrophically.
I guess where I was kind of going with that briefly was like just how complex that shit is, and then thinking of the Serpentine Mound. You know? And I know that there's not just the fact that they're like predicting the position of a solar eclipse on the summer solstice.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, that's weird.
fuck.
That's weird. Yeah. And it's the fact that it points right at that enormous crater
Yeah.
kind of seems like a message. Just maybe. So maybe they're trying to say something with that. I don't know.
No.
Maybe they're just saying that like snakes like eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. Their butt flaps were not that advanced for us.
That's right. That's right. No messages there.
Yeah, the message was we wear butt flaps.
That's right. And we like snakes.
And moons. We like snakes. Those are my kind of people, man.
That's right. Snakes and moons. All they need is pyramids.
Craters are cool.
And
Snakes.
They'll be complete beavers. Craters are cool. And snakes. God. Speaking of craters, like and the moon, like I've been thinking about this concept of that no crater on the moon is deeper than 3 miles. That's weird because like crater structure is always the same, and like if you expand it for a larger impact, a larger crater, the whole thing scales together. So the depth is always a ratio of the diameter or the radius. So, but on the moon, it is not like that. They cap out at 3 miles deep.
We should get up there and drill.
Even craters that are like enormously huge should have many more than 3 miles of depth. They're only 3 miles deep.
Yeah, we need to go up there and drill.
Yeah,
and find out.
Well, I mean, like if an impact couldn't penetrate it, I don't know. A drill would probably just.
That would really suck. Like, you know, at work, I'm working, you know, at the end of the road way over there, and I go to the shop and I get a drill bit.
Yeah.
And I go get in the gator and drive way out there, and then I start drilling the thing and the drill bit breaks.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn it.
He's like,
I have to go up
yep.
all the way back.
All the way back. Like we came all the way to the moon and our drill bit broke.
Damn it.
So let's play golf.
Yeah.
Let's drive this car around. Bet I can throw a pigskin over them mountains.
Let's put this hard plastic flag up here.
No, next time we need to bring wind. Right? to bring wind for the flag, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Bring a fan, dude.
Yeah, bring a fan. But yeah, that's
like 10 million RPMs,
That's
and
right.
the flag's barely
it's
doing
not even
anything.
moving any of the dust. But like so that implies that there's like this shell of incredibly strong material 3 miles underneath the surface of the moon, like, you know, roughly 3 miles down, all the way around it. That
Yeah,
it's
that's
encased in
crazy.
this shell of I mean, like, what can withstand impact?
Either that or it's very unstable and dry as fuck. And like, so a crater makes a deep hole
and then it fills.
But
in.
then other craters hit, and the whole thing is just like, and all the dirt just kind of like screes down. And
yeah,
just
but
fills
it's
it
weird
up.
that 3 miles is the depth. Like if that was happening, you would expect there to be a mean distribution.
Aren't there shallower ones?
Yes, but there are shallower ones, but they go down to 3 miles and stop there. They stop. That's as deep as they get, no matter how much bigger they get, which is weird.
Right. So
So like you have all these enormous craters down to like this one that should be 3 miles deep, and all of those are 3 miles deep, and then anyone smaller than that will have whatever depth it's supposed to be.
oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So you have all of these craters on the moon that are 3 miles deep, even though most of them should be a lot deeper than that. That's just weird. Then there's the problem with the tidal locking. Did we talk about this
There's
already?
a perfectly script derp explanation for that, Russ.
Which one?
Well,
Oh, no, I mean which one?
maybe the sediment at 3 miles deep is like fine sand
Yeah.
in an hourglass, and like anything that penetrates deeper than that is just like
Yeah, it's just absorbed into the quicksand. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, it could be that.
Yeah, the walls just cave in, and then the rest of the moon just adjusts and fills in everything.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah, that's just one. It's the solar wind vibrates the moon and pushes the dust into the craters.
Yeah.
And like what is that called when you have a material and like its ability to slope? You know, you could pile it up and it'll have this certain amount where
a
it's
slump or
yeah,
whatever.
the slump or
Slump.
whatever. Yeah, so the slump of the dust of the moon is like it gives you 3 mile
it's
deep
3
craters.
miles,
Yeah,
that's
that's what it
the
is.
slump of the dust of the moon.
The slump of the dust of the moon.
This sounds like a song.
Yeah.
The slump of the dust in the sun.
Yeah, it's like the wart on the frog and the
Yeah.
yeah.
In the bottom of the sea.
The wart on the
The
frog
bottom
and the
of-
bump on the log.
Yeah, right.
The slump on the dust of the moon. We should make it up, dude. So then the tidal locking, the fact that one side of it always faces Earth, or another way to put it is that its rotation around its axis is the same as its orbit around Earth, so that the same side always faces us. They call
Right.
that tidal locking, but there's no other body in the solar system that's tidally locked. All the other moons of all the other planets, and there's a lot of them, they rotate freely. They're not tidally locked to their superiors, which is weird because you'd think Jupiter with its enormous mass, it should be able to like lock its moons in so that the same face always faces out. But even Mercury, like so close to the sun, it's not tidally locked to it.
Isn't that the theory is that it has two centers
Two
of
centers
gravity?
of mass, yeah.
Two centers of mass, yeah.
Yeah, which is very strange.
So we do actually get to see around some of the moon sometimes because of the tilt of its
Yeah, there's
because of the combination of its tilt, like its polar tilt, axial tilt,
Yeah.
and then the tilt of its orbit. Like sometimes we can see a little bit further over the top.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes we can see a little bit further over the bottom.
But on the far side, there's a patch of moon that we will never see.
Never
from the
see,
Earth,
yeah.
like without drastic
yeah, huge
changes,
mirrors.
Yeah, large
Mirrors
fusion
and-
drives or something. You have to mount into the moon.
Mirrors, come on.
Mirrors?
Yeah, we just put a moon mirror out there. And
Oh, but put a moon
put a
mirror
rear
behind
view.
it.
Put a rear view mirror on the moon.
I got you.
We can see it the other side.
Freaking a blind spot mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That would work. We could use that mirror for other stuff too. Like burning aliens with the sunlight.
Brett, the Earth is flat. The moon is flat, but both are lensed. So the moon's lens arc makes it impossible to penetrate more than 3 miles.
Like you can't crush an egg end to end. That's right. That's right.
Holy shit! Flat mooners.
Flat mooners. Yeah. Well, I mean, like in the flat Earth, the canopy of stars is just like it's a couple of miles out there, and it's just a black fabric with holes poked in it. You know what I'm saying? Uh-oh, we just lost our show observer.
The whole show has just come to a
That's right.
freaking screeching halt.
No data. No data. So, so like the fact that it's tidally locked, like you said, it implies that it has two centers of mass. Which what can that mean? So, like, how do you have this moon that has like an impenetrable armor shell? You know, It basically seems like it's got this impenetrable armor shell that's been covered in dust over the eons, right? It's gathered all this dust and shit on top of it.
Yeah.
And
from impacts.
Yeah, from just various things happening. Like it's all ash and shit. Like it's been around a lot of burning planets.
So when they could supposedly calculate the density
yes.
of the moon, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
how actually, are they doing that? Based on its gravity? Or is it the other way around?
Like the mean density, yeah, is based on the gravitic pull that it exerts on the Earth.
Okay, so is there anything odd about that?
Yeah, it's denser than the Earth is, which, is it denser?
It's made of silver.
Ooh.
108.
So like the idea that the moon was part of Earth, like that it was broken off of it,
yeah.
right? If that is what happened, then the moon should be made up basically of the same materials as Earth, roughly. Like you could go find the same distribution or the same amounts. Like things that are trace metals here will be trace metals there, not in abundance.
But it's not volcanically active
at all. Yeah.
So you wouldn't see the same types of features on the surface,
right?
As you
right. But here. you could take samples and see that the bedrock stuff is will have the same amounts or the same types of isotopes as Earth. That's not the case. Like there's an abundance of helium-3 on the moon, which helium-3 is like non-existent on Earth, and it also has the same amount of nickel. It has the same amount of like iridium and other platinum group metals in it as asteroids and stuff do. So it's like it more matches. It's extraterrestrial. It's not from the Earth. And there's something to do with density. I can't remember which one it is.
Is that now like the standard model? Is that it's not from? Yeah. It's extraterrestrial.
Well, I mean, they've just kind of dropped the idea that it came from Earth.
Okay.
I don't know if they've got a new model.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not.
But whatever the Sumerians said is obviously total
right.
bullshit.
It's completely wrong. Yeah, it's totally not it. Like whatever they said, the Tiamat bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's not Kingu, right? But if it has enormous lava fields on it, so it's not volcanically active at all, and yet the things that we call seas, like the mares, the mare imbrium, the different dark patches on those are huge lava beds. Where'd that come from? Like, if there are no volcanoes at all on the moon, it's not, like you said, it's not volcanically active and doesn't look like it ever was. It never had at least not since early formation did it have a molten core. It cooled off and it's been that way forever. So like, where did all that lava come from?
I don't know.
Yeah. So there's a lot of mysteries about the moon. That, like, I remember there's a scientist that was saying like it's a lot easier to explain why it shouldn't be there than to explain why it is. There's all kinds of reasons why that thing is impossible. And then there's the alignments, like the different, like that its radius is 1,080 miles, 1080. So its diameter. Oh, okay, I see it. Yeah, 3.34 grams per centimeter. Okay, so it's less dense, right? That's what you're saying?
That's what it looks like. The moon's density is
lower than the Earth, right? So
3.34 grams per centimeter. Cubic centimeters.
Earth is 5.51 cubic centimeters.
Yeah.
Grams per cubic centimeter. So basically that, yeah. So if the moon had been a piece of Earth, like if it had been something hit Earth and broke a big molten glob of it off that became the moon, it should actually be more dense than the Earth is. That's what I remember. So yeah, so that's what it was. Like if it came from the Earth, it should be more dense. And the fact that it's less dense implies that it came from a bigger planet that has less density than the Earth.
Why should it be more dense?
Because
if it came from Earth?
Because there's a consolidate. Like I can't remember all the theory, but basically the idea is if you got a planet and then something comes and hits it and breaks a big chunk off of it, that becomes an orbital body. That the moon that's just been created will be denser than the planet itself because
it has more inertia
just like the
causing it to separate or move away.
Right. Like in other words, in order to separate from the planet, it has to become liquid. Almost all of it. Mm-hmm. And that'll result in like a denser body than the planet itself, which could have consolidated from mostly non-liquid things. But
gotcha.
So yeah, it's way less dense than Earth, which implies that Well, and so like we all know that the Sumerians were wrong about everything, but if Tiamat was like a water world that was basically a big gassy, like a gas giant that had an enormous ocean on it, way down there in the atmosphere, it would be very much less dense than the Earth. It would have a very low, like Jupiter has a very low density. All those gas giants out there. So if you have a moon created from that, it'll be higher density than that, but it will be lower density than the rocky bodies of the inner solar system, like the Earth.
But according to the Sumerians, the Earth was part of Tiamat,
Right.
but also a chunk. It was basically a bigger chunk of Tiamat, or
Right.
a big chunk of Tiamat.
That's right.
It would have been molten when it was separated.
Kingu was created, by their story, like Tiamat was extruding these things. Nothing was making Tiamat create the moons, but she made like 4 or 5 before Nibiru comes around. And Kingu was the biggest one.
Yeah.
So there was no impacts. The way the story told it was like she was making generals, like to and Kingu was the biggest one, but it sort of seemed like they were just kind of extruding from her. That's why they were saying that she was going mad. Something catastrophic was happening to that planet long before it impacted Nibiru. Because it was like she had been the mother goddess or whatever, the solar system. It was like the sun and her. And the sun was the father and she was the mother. And she had all the waters of life. But then she goes mad. She goes completely insane and starts making generals and shit. And she's like, I'm going to kill all y'all motherfuckers. It's like building an army. And then Nibiru comes in and kills her.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, but Earth is part. You're right. So Earth is part of that. So it would be denser than she was. But are you saying like why is it so much more dense than the moon if the moon was also created from that body? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just trying to figure it out. Like I can see how after she would have created all these moons, she would be even more dense.
Right. She would have shrank. Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And then
the impact of the Nibiru is going to be
right. And then knocking off like a massive piece that becomes Earth. That would have been
well. And then remember that the first impact is actually one of Nibiru's moons. It goes bam, and like it stays there.
Right.
Like she absorbs it.
Right.
And then he comes along the next time and actually hits her and breaks her in half.
Right.
So
creates the hammered bracelet.
Right. So her density would have gone up greatly with the absorption of that moon.
That's true. Yeah, because it would have been all molten shit everywhere.
Yeah. So like Kingu was made before that. So
plus when Nibiru actually impacted, it would have not only blown off all the lighter material from the outside, but the core, the most dense part of the planet would have been
is what remains intact mostly
dislodged and remained more intact, which would have ultimately been Earth.
Yeah.
So we would have gotten
that's a cool idea. Like that he knocked the core out of
yeah. So we got some of the surface stuff like the water and various different lighter things, but we got a huge, massive iron core.
Right, and then all those core materials also mixed into the crust material, which is why we have veins of gold. And shit.
Yeah.
Like gold should be down in the core of any planet because it's heavy as hell.
Right.
But on the Earth, it's near the surface, and like there's a whole bunch of stuff like that, metals and things that should be down in the core that are all near the surface, and these weird veins that like flow through the rock. Like it implies it was all molten.
Blood.
Yeah, the blood of the Earth.
The blood of the core of the ancient planets.
That's right. Shadows.
We are just the skeleton.
That's right. So there was some people call the asteroid belt the bones of Lucifer, because like in the Western, like instead of Tiamat, that planet would have been called Lucifer, the light bringer. So like that's the bones of Lucifer, the asteroid belt. And we live on the corpse. That's why this is hell, bro.
Yeah.
We live on the dead corpse of Lucifer.
Yeah. It's just like, the circle of life, right? You kill an animal and it's dead.
That's right.
But there's all this life teeming all over the dead body.
It's still teeming with life, even though it's dead.
That's right. That's what we are. We're just little grubs cruising around munching on shit from a dead planet.
Yep. Ugh. Whenever you say that, whenever I hear that grubs or whatever, I always think of the beehive we opened up and all this.
No.
Yeah, see?
And then
Can't even say it.
eventually a vulture's going to come down here and just gobble us all up.
Yeah.
We better take a break.
Yeah, we need to take a break. 34, 36. So we will be back.
Eventually, the dead planet will be eaten by snakes. And we're back, Adamu, taking you out of your false reality into the apocalypse,
into the desert of the real.
your weekly escape from false realities.
That's right.
To the mysteries of the universe that are unsolved. Nothing is known.
The apocalypse is happening right now.
That's right.
We have a little bit of time to solve a few more mysteries though before we all die.
Yeah. Before we all strike an awesome fossil face.
That's right. For the next archaeologists.
Right.
So we were talking about the possibility maybe of there being an eclipse viewable from the poles, and that turns out that can happen. That you can get a full solar eclipse from the poles on the equinoxes.
Yeah, I was
Equinoxors?
I was thinking that Brett found the last one at the North Pole was on an equinox, and that made me think that that's probably the only time of year.
Well, then he said that the last one, the view from the South Pole, was also on an equinox.
Right.
So
I'm thinking that that's the only time of year that it's possible to have a solar eclipse. It wouldn't be during the solstices because you're not in the right position.
Right.
Tilted towards or away from the sun, and the moon is still on the ecliptic. So I don't think, or really close to 5, whatever.
5.5
something.
1.555.
Yeah, no one cares. So yeah, going back to the pendulum, it'd be interesting. You know, you have the pendulum, you swing it facing the sun when you start the cycle.
So it should always swing facing the sun because it's decoupled from the Earth.
Right. So the Earth, you're standing slightly away from the North Pole, looking at the pendulum that is swinging towards the sun, and you're spinning around it.
Yeah.
As the Earth turns.
So to you, it'll look like the pendulum is turning, but really you're spinning around it
Right.
and it stays still.
And it would always be swinging at the sun until the moon crossed over, like between our view of the sun.
And then it would go nuts.
And then the pendulum would go off.
Yeah.
It would start pointing somewhere else.
Pointing somewhere else.
And it would be interesting. Would it decelerate or accelerate? I mean, technically, it's not spinning.
Right.
So would it begin to spin, and what direction would
Yeah.
it spin? That would be interesting to find out.
Yeah. Or maybe that's maybe doing all that is like dividing by 0. You're just going to end up with a giant hole in the universe. And
Just portal. Jump in.
portal.
Go for it.
Yep. You gotta be prepared for the divide by 0, man.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I'm gonna have to think about the eclipses on the equinox. There's a lot of rolling balls and axes and stuff going on there.
I've been working on my mental imagery of our positions at these markers, the solstices and the equinox. And
So that comes to another one, like this idea of the sun orbiting a common center around that's being caused by this large orbital body, Planet 9 or whatever they're calling it. It used to be Planet X.
Yeah.
Now it's Planet 9.
Used to be Nibiru.
Right,
and
it's not Nibiru.
Of course it's not.
Not.
But it has a orbital period of roughly 3,000 plus years.
Yeah, it's like, 3,000.
But Sitchin was wrong.
Right, Sitchin was dumb. He didn't know what he was talking about. Sumerians didn't know anything about it.
Every story I've ever read about Planet X, they're like, yeah, it's pretty much like that, but it's not. That's not it.
It's like everything that he said, but he's dumb, and we all know he's wrong. And the Sumerians didn't say that. So yeah, you're basically talking about a body that and the other thing is it's probably extrasolar. In other words, it's a rogue planet that was caught by the sun's gravity for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Like-
kind of like what the Sumerians
Yeah,
said.
yeah, but not like that.
Not like that at all.
Yeah, because that's bullshit.
Yeah.
We all know that they didn't know anything about this stuff. But the idea is at some point in the distant past, the solar system is cruising along, and here comes this rogue planet, an enormous one. It was, a gas giant.
Or maybe we just ran into it. It was just
That's
like
what I mean.
chilling.
Like, yeah, but we're not moving. Come on, everybody knows this. It comes running into us.
It's flat galaxy.
That's right. That's right. It's a rolling ball, and it came rolling into our solar system. But like, so it's not like the solar system it was created in is completely different. So it will have motions that are way off. Like, retrograde for it won't be a big deal. Like for anything going retrograde in our solar system, that's not possible in the idea of solar system formation, which is basically you have a big whirlpool where everything is turning and spinning the same direction. So you end up with everything once they consolidate it into bodies, they're still all spinning. And
that just doesn't make sense to me.
Why?
Because have you ever seen a freaking hurricane?
Yeah, everything is spinning in the same.
Yeah,
direction.
everything is all spinning, and then of course, like if you watch the clouds over time, they all turn into little balls that are orbiting around a big cloud ball.
Oh yeah, well, that part doesn't make sense. Well, there's not enough gravity.
Bad comparison, but still, just doesn't.
Well, you can think of it like I think of it more of like whirlpools in water. Like you've seen how like you can make a giant whirlpool and smaller ones will spin off of it. It's kind of like that, sort of. I mean, like the big whirlpool won't become a bunch of smaller ones, but small ones will spin off of it, and they will always be spinning the same direction as the parent whirlpool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea. So anything going retrograde in our solar system, and there are things that do, anything going retrograde has been affected by an outside force. And we have at least two things that I know of. Venus's rotation around its axis is retrograde.
Yeah.
And then I think it's Neptune. It's Neptune's moon Triton is orbiting Neptune retrograde, and it's tearing it apart. It's like really hard on the moon. So those things can't really happen without there's being some drastic outside force coming in to cause those, right? And so the idea that you have this rogue planet or whatever it is, I mean, it's a planet, maybe it's a failed star, brown dwarf, whatever, but it comes cruising through the solar system at some point, okay, and maybe it doesn't run into anything, but it passes close enough to some of the large planets here that they slow it down enough to where it is now trapped. It then swings around the sun and goes back out, but it doesn't have enough. It doesn't have escape velocity anymore,
right?
Because it passed too close to Jupiter and then swung around that and went too close to Saturn and shit, whatever. So now it's caught. So now it's in this enormous elliptical orbit and it's going It's going the wrong way, right? Every time it comes into the inner solar system, it's like going against traffic. Right. Like everything's like, right? And it's huge. And like you can also see this in the there's an interesting I'll see if I can find this graphic and put it in the show notes. But there's an interesting where it has all the bodies of the solar system sort of lined up next to each other, starting from big down to small. So you got the sun, then Jupiter, and then Saturn, and all the gas giants all the way down. And then it shows their axial tilts. Mm-hmm. Okay, and they're all tilted over to some degree in the same direction. Like every single one of them is tilted over. And Jupiter's like 3 degrees. And it's also the most massive. Venus is like 170. It's almost upside down, which is why its spin around its axis is retrograde. It was spinning the right direction, but it got turned all the way over. Now it's going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Right.
So he says Uranus also has a retrograde rotation.
Uranus has retrograde rotation? Do you mean I know one of those is knocked over on its side. Like Venus is definitely rotating retrograde because its axis is turned all the way over. But is it Neptune or Uranus that's like knocked over on its side like 90 degrees? It's not retrograde. It's just turned 90 degrees. Its rotation is retrograde. Okay, cool. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. So that kind of implies that something massive came through the solar system and like kind of knocked everything over, right? And you can see it based on the mass of the object, how much it's tilted. Like Jupiter's mass is immense, so it's tilted a little bit 3 degrees.
Okay, I got
right? And of course, it would also have to do with how close it got.
Right.
So it probably came really close to to Neptune, or if it's Neptune or Uranus that's turned 90. It's like basically laid down on its side. Its axis is like with the plane of the ecliptic, yeah. So it's spinning like this.
It really is a rolling ball.
Yeah, it really is rolling ball. Yeah. So that really, yeah, all those planets being knocked over, all those axes, that's a lot of energy because all that angular momentum has to be pushed down. You know, that's a lot of energy. So that's evidence that something came through here a long time ago and did that. And so the idea that there's this enormous orbiting body, and the other interesting thing when I was looking at a kind of a map of this whole concept, where the entire inner solar system is basically a single ring around the sun. That's the scale.
Yeah.
So you've got all those planets are straight, and then you can see the orbits of the trans-Neptunian objects, all these little dwarf planets. They're all going out around the same side. They all extend out, like say to the west.
Yeah.
From the sun. All of them are going that direction, and all the comets are going that way too. Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, they're making this big ellipse, but they get close to the sun
right
on only one side of the long oval.
Right. And all the long ovals are sort of all pointing in the same direction away from the sun. They're like to the west or whatever, just arbitrary. And so what they're saying is that the big elliptical orbit of this unknown Planet X, not Nibiru body, is going to the east. It
would be the opposite direction.
Right. And so that's the reason why all those things are going that way is because of this thing.
Or maybe that other thing is like pulling the whole solar system away from those things.
Yeah, that could be it too. I know that the idea that like comets being all these like sort of dirty ice, right? They're like slush balls, like a snowball that's got mud and rocks
and explosives. Yeah,
explosives. Yeah, black hats, M1s.
It's just got rockets all over it. You just never know when they're going to go off.
That's right. Gets close to the sun, it's like. Yeah. Yes. But they're like the idea is that those are fragments of Tiamat's ocean. From the impact, bam, and it sends these enormous droplets of Tiamat's ocean with all this mud and silt mixed in, and those become the comets.
Yeah.
So they're all going way out of these elliptical orbits. They're also going retrograde because Nibiru is retrograde.
Yeah.
And it knocks them in the same direction it's going, right?
Yeah.
And they're also tilted 70 degrees to the plane of the ecliptic. All of them are. They come from way down below the solar system.
Yeah.
So
they talked about Nibiru. The Sumerians talked about it being the most high because it's like its orbit was tilted, like you're saying.
That's
so
right.
You have, like, if you imagine the solar system, the normal solar system is a disk.
Right. Flat solar system.
Yeah, flat solar system. Nibiru's orbit is elliptical, so it's, once again, we're talking about like the oval that comes close to the sun.
Right. It swings around the sun really close.
But its long oval sticks up.
Right.
Or down, whichever,
Well, yeah, it's north pole of the sun or north pole of the earth makes it so it's going north.
Right,
way
north of the
up.
earth.
Yeah, and then all the comets are going down.
Yeah. So they called it the most high. It created its seat in the heavens.
That's right.
And it was the most high above all the other gods.
And I like to imagine like what that must look like. Like if on that planet and you could see the entire solar system laid out, like in the night sky, just laid out there with the sun and then all the planets, you could kind of see them from above. It must be badass.
As you get closer, it's like,
yeah, you're like, oh shit.
That would be
shit.
That would be crazy the way their sky would change. How different that must be compared to ours.
And if you think about it, like it comes all the way into the asteroid belt every time. That's its apogee or whatever, the closest it gets to the sun, which means it has to pass all the gas giants every time.
Yeah. Cataclysm, baby.
Yeah. That's like an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah. Hold on, I got to stop on my way to the asteroid belt, get some gas.
That's right. Gonna stop off on old Saturn's moon. Give me some gas. But that explains a lot of things about our solar system if that's what's going on. Like that gives you the mechanism for all the retrograde motions. For the reason why there's this enormous lopsidedness for all these bodies that go out, like why are they all going out in the same direction and like, but then you also have to have the idea that now you've got the solar system as being like the sun, and then there's the ring of the inner solar system, and then there's these two enormous like wings of objects that go out in either direction.
Like the winged disc.
Right, but the mass of the wing on the right, or the ring of Nibiru, is much higher than the mass of all the other things.
Right, and they're also not equally they're not equally distributed. They don't. Sometimes they might line up, and therefore have more their mass is more concentrated.
Yeah, that's right.
And then other times they're all dispersed, and so it's
Yeah, but this one's always concentrated.
Solid, yeah.
And so like
it might have moons.
Yeah,
well.
it could have. Yeah, well, it did, at least in the beginning part. It makes moons to attack.
Yeah.
But anyway, its mass is going to drag the center of the solar system away from the sun towards it. So that puts the common center of the solar system like somewhere between the sun and the nearest part of its orbit to the sun, somewhere in there. So the sun's going to actually orbit that.
Right.
Okay. And that orbital period of the sun going around that center can be, maybe it's the same as the because like if you look at the two-body rotation thing, the way they orbit each other, it's like
they speed up. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's probably like that. It's probably the period of the sun's orbit around this common center is going to be the same as the orbit of this thing. So 3,300 years or whatever. So then we get to precession. So like the idea is that this system is what's causing precession, but that orbital period is too short. But what they're saying is what's causing precession is the rotation of this entire system slowly over time. So the sun and this thing are orbiting this common center, and that entire system is rotating. That entire
thing is spinning around.
It takes 26,000 years to complete a full rotation.
Yeah.
And that's what causes precession.
So in other words, our position relative to the sun on the equinox or at any given point in the year doesn't actually change relative to the sun.
Right.
It's that the entire system, or I should say, relative to the solar system, it doesn't actually change.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
It appears to us that the background stars, I mean, they really are background stars are different, or they change over time. They're moving.
Yeah.
That's
because our relative positions in this whole system is drifting.
Right. The whole freaking massive thing is spinning.
Right.
So it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really cool.
It is cool.
That explains it pretty well. Like,
but you can still say our axis is wobbling.
Right. It's just different axis. Yeah. Because that's what. I mean, exactly right. It's the axis of this center of gravity in the solar system.
Where the center of the wobble is not on Earth.
Right.
But
we've moved the center off of Earth, just like every other center we had over here.
Yeah. Except for the one polar axis of the entire universe. That does actually kind of go.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. The axis of evil you're talking about. Of course, we have the axis of evil on Earth.
No,
that's just the axis of the entire universe.
The one they're calling the axis of evil. It's the entire universe. If there was an axis, like it kind of just goes
directly through Earth. Yeah, that's right. All those other ones are off Earth, but there's just this one. And it's just the whole.
Yeah,
universe.
It's just the entire universe.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's dumb. People think it means something. It doesn't.
Yeah.
The other thing about this is something called the Kuiper Belt Cliff. Okay, like how do belts have cliffs? The Kuiper Belt is basically a disk, like a theoretical disk of comets that starts somewhere between Neptune and Pluto. Okay, the nearest ones are somewhere out there between Neptune and Pluto, and they're basically this disk. There's a disk of comets, of cometary bodies that extends way out, and like as it gets farther from the sun, the disk kind of fans out.
It's like the Oort cloud or whatever.
The Oort cloud is the big sphere that's really far out there.
Okay,
so you have the Kuiper Belt, right, and it basically starts from the real thin at the inner solar system and kind of fans out, and then merges with the Oort cloud, which is a big sphere. But there's a cliff for the Kuiper Belt. Right, it should do that. It should go out and fan out and then merge with the Oort cloud, but it doesn't. It goes out and then just cuts off like very sharply. Like all those objects just they don't exist after a certain point. That's called the Kuiper Belt Cliff. That in other words, there's something orbiting way out there that keeps them from that has basically shaved the outside edges of the disk off. Right, so it makes this cliff, right, this cutoff point for the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt Cliff. Yeah. Come on. So, but I don't think that
if you were like the scientist working on that, and you didn't call it the Kuiper Belt Cliff Notes, you're lame.
Right. The stuff that I'm writing down about this, I call the Kuiper Belt Cliff Notes.
Oh, love them lame jokes.
Them nerd jokes.
I call this the Kuiper Belt Cliff Notes.
Wow.
Wow. All right, so I think that's it for the pendulums and space and Nibiru and comets. And,
Yeah, but basically the bottom line is
Sitchin is done.
we're about to be destroyed. Yeah. There's like so much shit out there. We're gonna get nailed. So we got to come up with a plan, right? And the main part of the plan is take power from governments,
That's right.
give it to ourselves,
Yeah.
and kick ass until we can leave the planet.
That's right. That's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah,
That's a great plan.
like yeah.
I like part of my plan is that I want to become they. I want to become the they. You know, when people are like, they're keeping this from us. I want to be the they that they're talking about. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. How do you join they? That's what I want to know. I'm sending my resume. Hey they, I think I could be a good they.
Okay, guys, this is Brett, dude. Okay, guys, look, there's like billions and billions and billions of objects that are eventually going to crash into Earth, and we're all going to be destroyed. So the first order of business is stop global warming. Fucking brilliant plan.
That's right. We've got to stop this like 0.8 degree.
Yeah, and while we're doing it, we'll call it saving the planet.
That's right. We're going to save the planet from this like catastrophic warming right before we get destroyed by a giant object from space. Because that's
saving the planet. Yeah,
we're destroying the planet.
I'm just saying the first order of business.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. But we are destroying it. Like, look around at how destroyed it is right now.
Yep. We must have lived on the moon at some point.
That's right.
It's
you can tell
fucking dead.
that's where we used to live. That's right. If you want to know what happens if we don't stop global warming, look at the moon. It's a pile of ash.
3 miles deep.
That's right. That's how that fucking lava got there.
with a-
moon warming.
Yeah, glass core.
This giant bell. It rings like a bell. It's weird.
Yeah, well, describe that.
When the Apollo missions would lift off from the surface of the moon, when they got up into orbit around the moon, they would drop the engine that had lifted them off. They would just drop it, and it would fall and impact, and like they would leave seismic detectors all over the place on the moon so that they could, because you can use seismic waves to sort of map the interior of something.
Yeah.
But when this thing fell and hit, it was like boom, and they said it rang for like over 12 hours.
Shit.
And they said that
I wonder what the frequency was.
Yeah, I don't know, but they were saying that the frequency response pattern was very similar to a bell. That's why they say that it rang like
So very regular.
When NASA guys say stuff, they're not like just throwing words out there at random.
Yeah.
They're not saying it rang like a bell because that's a euphemism. They're saying it fucking rang just like a bell.
Yeah. So it contracted on two sides and then expanded on two sides at
like
90 degrees at right angles to the contraction of two sides, and then they reversed. And then they reversed again at a constant period.
That's right. It was flapping.
I wonder what that period was. I want to know.
It was probably some fraction of the Schumann resonance.
Yeah.
But I mean, for 12 hours, think of that. We have earthquakes
Or
here.
some multiple.
We have earthquakes here that are enormous. If the Earth had the same structure as the moon does, that whatever that is that causes the moon to do that, then every earthquake would make the whole Earth vibrate for days. I mean, maybe even months, because if you think about the energy differences in like that little Apollo engine just like impacting, and then an entire like a 9.0 earthquake.
Yeah.
Like the Earth would ring and like the ground would liquefy and just it would be unlivable. So for the whole moon to just kind of like the whole thing to vibrate, that
But
makes
we have this highly viscous liquid.
the dampening thing. Yeah.
These solid plates are on, so it's like it's like
Well, and the oceans would be a dampening effect too. It's like sticking chewing gum on your drum head.
Yeah. It's like you hit your mattress or whatever, and it's like blown.
Yeah.
Gives you a couple.
Yeah.
Little bounces.
Like hit your mercury filled waterbed. That's what we figured out. I'm going to sell these things like a mercury filled waterbed. So if you die in your bed, you just like they could just unzip it and you just go down in the mercury and they close it back up and that's it. You're buried.
So
Not recommended for any floors above the first.
Brett just asked if it implies a hollow resonant chamber inside the moon. I don't think so.
It doesn't have to.
Because a solid
a crystal will ring.
a solid material will ring. So something being hollow can add to the amplitude, right? And that's an acoustical effect.
No, what implies a hollow chamber inside of it is the fact that there is this incredibly dense layer 3 miles beneath all the dust. And so since we know the density of the moon itself, and we know that there's this layer that can withstand massive impacts without
right, so
degrading.
that if it was solid all the way down with that material, then
it would be way
too
much more dense. Yeah. So what that implies is that most of its density, most of its material is concentrated in this layer, and that the inside is mostly hollow.
But again, if our ideas of how gravity relates to mass are incorrect, then all of that shit is moot. So,
okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. Would that make our measuring of its density incorrect? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm thinking, because the way they measure, I don't know about this
because like we measure the density based on the gravitic pull of the moon,
right? Yeah. But they're talking about average density,
yeah,
right? But they're looking at this layer that's far more dense,
right? Well, they're saying so the average density of the moon itself is X, right?
Based on its
based on its
gravitic pull,
the pull it exerts on
force.
Earth. So yes, so if that comes from somewhere else, then those would be decoupled, unless they're not. Like, could they be connected anyway?
But they had to have got they have to know pretty close, like the gravitic pull or push or whatever it is, because they've freaking landed shit on
right.
it.
But I'm saying like if knowing the gravitic pull doesn't tell you anything about the body itself if the source of the pull is from somewhere else.
That's right. So they may have, but if they're calculating the gravity by mass, they're not. They're calculating the mass by the gravity.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's my point.
Right. So unless there is some way that the elastic universe would still connect those, like, can they still be connected even indirectly? The mass somehow connected to, like, if you assume that it's in a place that has ubiquitous mass everywhere, enough mass to where it's going to gather everything that it can get based on the node that it's in.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't know how you can do that.
Yeah, maybe not.
Because it's only going to collect what's there.
Right, that's what I mean.
Right.
So, like, if it's in a place where there's mass everywhere, in other words, there's dust. Like, we're in a galaxy. We're not in deep space.
Right.
So you can assume that any node is going to have material in it, at least around here.
Yeah, most of them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it would be hard for a node to not have material in it because it's going to pass through material at some point, right?
Right. So there's a lot of material around.
Right. So what I'm saying is that since we're in a material dense area, relatively dense area with nebulas and shit all around us, and we pass through stuff, so that you can assume that
they're fairly well connected.
Right, and then the nodes here are going to have their max mass or whatever. And then, so you could say that they're connected.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
So they're all, because there's so much matter and shit around.
They're going to get
they're going to share it around. They're going to split it up pretty much evenly based on the power of the waves.
That's right.
The power of the resonance around the nodes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
good point.
So
we're fucked.
No. So I'm just saying, so you can still use the gravity to like estimate the mass of the thing, since you can assume that the mass of it's going to be the max.
Right.
So that.
But don't they also say? I know we got to take a break here. I forgot to start the timer over there, but I'm looking at this timer.
Second time.
We got a few more minutes, but don't they also speculate about how many craters are on it? That they're like, how the fuck?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
like, why has it been hit this many times? Like, what the hell? Because it's not,
because we live in a fucking shitty gallery.
Supposedly, it's gravity is not great enough to make. I guess what am I trying to say?
Okay, so it doesn't have an atmosphere, which would burn away a lot of them. Like Earth doesn't get hit by a lot of, like, the moon gets hit by every tiny little particle because it doesn't have an atmosphere at all.
Okay, so it is explained.
Like,
then.
even paint, chips of paint go make a little crater.
Right. So it makes sense then. But it has all these craters.
But it has enormous craters that would impact Earth even though we have an atmosphere. Like, most of the craters we can see from here are enormous.
But also,
and
Earth has shitloads of them too that we don't even know about because it's all covered in other sludge.
Because we have a biome that constantly changes it. Yeah.
And we have, we're volcanically active, so that's always fucking shit up.
Yeah. That's why they call them astrobleams. Like you can't even see it, but it's all the crater structure's down there.
Yeah.
It's like shattered crystals and nanodiamonds, microspherules. But the scary thing is you look at the moon and you see all those impacts, and you realize that like the Earth is going to have many more than that because the moon's gravity is way less. We're going to get hit by more stuff because the Earth's gravity is
more stuff, but it's going to burn it. A lot of that stuff is going to burn up in the atmosphere.
But I'm only talking about the ones that are enormous.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so it's got all these enormous craters all over it. I mean, it's just covered. Like the whole surface is pockmarked with gigantic craters, right? And they lay on top of each other, And so the Earth has to have that, but times 10. Because
so that's what I'm wondering is like all that shit that we're picking up on the moon rocks and all that kind of stuff is just like bits and pieces of the leftover freaking things that hit it.
Yeah, the dust. A lot of the dust is too. Like they were afraid that they were afraid when they were first going to land that the dust was going to be like
powder and
meters thick. Yeah, that they were going to get buried in it because it would be incredibly fine and it has no water.
Yeah,
so it'd just be, and you like land on it and go and just disappear.
That's freaky, dude.
Yeah, but it didn't happen because of like a couple of things. Like number one, they haven't really ever addressed this, but there's not that much dust. Like the reason they were estimating that amount of dust is because they're thinking the moon is 4 billion years old and blah 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 blah. There's not that much. There's like 3 inches of dust.
But also it rings like a bell, which is so every time it gets impacted, it like and all that dust like settles perfectly.
Right. Which it should sift it all out and everything. But then there's something called vacuum cementing that causes it to sort of bond with it.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Which they had big problems with that with like various moving parts. Like it's stuck together and it would normally move. It would slide across. It doesn't. It's like vacuum cemented, and you just can't get out.
Man, vacuum cement. That sounds freaking badass.
Get your vacuums out, and some super glue, and some baking soda.
Yeah. All right, so we need to take a break now.
Okay. All right. Now it's time for a break.
Yeah.
Now it's time for a break.
It was weird because like a little while ago it wasn't time for a break, and now it is.
That is strange.
What the fuck?
Could time be linear? Whoa. Like a snake. Mystery lovers, pill seekers, and conspiratorialists all across the fruited plain. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live, the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. We've been discussing all things space.
Living space.
That's right. We live on this tiny planet in this immense space. But I was going to move to some geology.
Yeah. Much smaller subject.
Yeah, I've been looking at the North American part of the end of the last ice age because that's basically what they say that's the epicenter of everything. And there's this cool map that shows you the kind of the scatter of material from this impact from the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis that basically it spreads all across the Earth, and it's kind of based on rotation. You can see that like the stuff, the material was ballistic, right? And so it goes up, and then the Earth rotates beneath it, and then it falls back down. Oh wow! Right,
that's cool.
So there's a phenomenon we've talked about this a little bit. I think the Carolina Bays. So along the coast of the Carolinas, it kind of just like it covers about, I don't know, like 60 to 70% of the eastern seaboard of the United States. Like you can see these things all up and down. But it's in the Carolinas where they're the most pronounced. And there are these enormous elliptical geoforms in the ground. I mean, and they're really huge. Like if you look at the pictures, like you'll see little roads and little bitty farms and houses and shit. And there's just this enormous like oval.
Yeah.
And it'll be full of trees. They're not deep enough to have water. Some of them do in the marshlands. Some of them will be full of water, but there's literally thousands of them. And what's interesting is like, and there's been a debate on what these things are for
Do they have a name for them?
the Carolina Bays.
The Carolina Bays.
Yeah.
A geological name.
Oh, no, that's the name of them. I mean, like
Okay.
they're like, they look like they were. The reason they don't have a geological name is because no one's clear on the process, right?
Okay.
So that's what the debate is over. Is like, how did these get formed? Now, see, uniformitarians want them to be created by wind and water and
Yeah.
1 grain of sand and all that bullshit. So they have all these arguments on how these things are very similar to dune formations, and which is bullshit because they're ovals. They're not, dunes will be big arcs.
Yeah.
They can be pushed by wind, right?
Yeah.
And the the direction of the prevailing wind will have the steep slope, and there's the long,
Yeah.
But these aren't like that. They are like, none of them are deep enough to be lakes. Okay, so they're not that deep, but they have this defined ridge line on the outside. So it's got like it's a. I think the best way to describe it, this is what I thought of. Like if you have a floor, it's got a lot of dust on it, and the dust is all very smooth or whatever, and then you start flicking little pebbles or little tiny like rocks or whatever into the dust. It'll leave these oval forms when the rock hits the dust, it poof, and leaves this oval shape in the dust, and that's exactly what this is. This is what these look like. And as you start from the southern part of the eastern seaboard and you move north, the long axis of the ovals shifts. Now, see, like the long axis of all these ovals, when you look at them, they're all pointing the same direction. If you see a big picture, the ovals are all facing the same way.
Right.
And they have a front and a back too. So there's like, on one side of the oval, they'll be a little bit wider than the other side.
Yeah.
Right. So they're all oriented in the same direction. But as you go north, the orientation of them all shifts.
So it's kind of giving you pointing to a common
yeah,
center.
it implies a common origin. Yeah.
Yeah. Origin.
The thing is that like when people did a bunch of surveying and everything and sort of figured out where the axis was along the the long axis was, and then drew these long axes out, to try to find this common origin point, you get this big mess somewhere over the Great Lakes region. They don't really all point to a common origin.
Okay.
There's this big, they're kind of spread out all over the place. Well, and so for a while they consider that to be like, okay, so that means that they're not, that this is not what happened, right? The uniformitarians consider that to be a debunk of the idea that this was impact related at all, since they didn't point to a common origin. But a couple other people have come in since then, and one guy was like, well, you dumbasses didn't account for the rotation of the Earth, right? Because like he's saying these are going to be ballistic ejecta, right? So if something hits the Earth, and the impact is going to throw a whole bunch of shit out in these long arcs that will basically go way up into space and then come back down and impact again.
Okay, so they take a lot of time then.
Yeah.
Like hours.
So yeah, at least like 30 minutes to an hour, like depending on what the initial trajectory was, how straight up it was, right? And some
of them will be shorter, some will be longer.
Right, and you can tell which ones are what because again they lay on top of each other. So you'll see that there's this enormous one, and then it's got a smaller one. It's like definitely laid over top of its edge.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can see that some of them happened later.
Holy shit.
Okay. So this guy, he was like, so let's calculate for the rotation of the Earth during these ballistic trajectories. And suddenly that consolidates all this big mess of lines going everywhere. It draws them into a common point. Okay. It basically, once you correct for all this motion.
Right at the Great Lakes or near the Great Lakes?
The state of Michigan kind of looks like a mitten or whatever. Like, you know what I'm talking about? So where the thumb is, the thumb is caused by this deep indent into the shape of the state.
And that's where Lake Michigan curves down, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the lake comes curving down right here. There's this deep indent that causes the shape of the thumb.
Right.
That's called Saginaw Bay. And it's kind of a geological anomaly in the sense that like it's really deep, and it's kind of like it gets deeper as you go closer to the shore. Right? So you start out here in the lake, and then the Saginaw Bay like digs into the state of Michigan and gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and then stops at this like cliff wall or whatever.
Wow.
That's called Saginaw Bay, and it's kind of a geological anomaly. So that's where they point to. They kind of converge over that. Okay, so the idea is that this was an oblique impact that happened amongst a whole bunch of other impacts that were not oblique. And oblique means, let's see if I can describe this without waving my arms around because you guys can't see that. Like, imagine like when things are impacting the Earth, they're coming straight down to the atmosphere and hitting the ground. But if you shifted them up to where they just kind of skipped off the top of the ball, right?
Yeah.
Like if it's a near miss, you know. So if you're shooting a BB gun at a basketball and you hit it right in the middle, that's like a regular impact. But if you hit it out on the edge where the BB like skips past it, it touches it but doesn't
ricochets off.
Yeah, skips past, keeps going in that same direction. That's an oblique impact, and these are known to happen. There's pictures of oblique impacts that have happened on Mars and on the Moon. They're still preserved, so you can see them. So like when an oblique impact happens, the body that impacts doesn't actually, all of it doesn't hit. It's just the bottom part of it.
Right.
So it will dig this trough. Okay. But then the rest of it, the top part, shaves off and then just keeps going and goes back out into space. So they're not nearly as energetic as a regular impact. But this one was in the ice sheet. So you have to imagine, like, the things that make the oblique impact different is, number one, it's in the atmosphere for a lot longer than a regular impact. A regular impact will be in the atmosphere for less than 2 seconds, and then wham, it hits the ground. And then everybody's concerned with that after that, right?
Yeah.
You forget about whatever it was doing with the air. But an oblique impact will be burning through the atmosphere for a long time. It comes in at a really low angle, and like it'll spend several minutes, and it keeps getting closer and closer to the surface, right? And it's enormous. And it's like it's pushing this huge wall of air in front of it, okay? Because it's going too fast for the air to move around it, so that it just is pushing this wall of highly compressed air in front of it,
leaving a vacuum behind it.
right? And then it's so as it continues to travel through the atmosphere, the curve of the Earth is bringing the ground closer to it, okay?
Right.
But there's 2 miles of ice on top of it, so it begins to hit the ice. Okay, but unlike an impactor that comes down and like slams into the ice and sort of makes a spalling pattern, like a circular shatter.
Yeah.
This thing starts digging through it and pushing. So the ice is like cracking and then exploding outwards, and then eventually it makes impact with the actual ground underneath the ice, and the ground will absorb a certain amount of the impactor. That causes Saginaw Bay, but then the thing continues to burn through the ice, digging this trench until it gets.
Yeah, not to mention it's like burning hot. So
right, I mean it's incredibly hot. It's got this enormous shockwave in front of it. You know,
I can't remember what the term is for turning a solid directly into a gas, skipping the liquid state, but that's probably happening.
Yeah, or turning the gas directly into a solid, like all that atmosphere pushed in front of it. You know, it probably was. It would like
making
getting hit
crystals.
By that. Yeah, getting hit by that would be the same as getting hit by a wall of steel. You know, but. So that would have been. What's interesting is the paper that I was reading. They were talking about this, and the guy was saying, so the impacts are not what caused the megafaunal extinction. Okay, it was the secondary effects of this one oblique impact that caused. So it's sending enormous chunks of ice into ballistic orbit, into ballistic trajectories. Okay, like they were saying, baseball stadium sized pieces of ice.
Oh my god.
Okay, so if you were, he said that anything within 100 miles of the place where it impacted, Saginaw Bay, everything within 100 miles dies. Everything, all plants, all animals, like anything that close to it is dead instantly because of all the energy and the heat and the shockwave. You just die like that. Anybody 1,000 miles away would have seen like all this bright flash. They would hear all this crazy thunder, right? They would see this bright flash, and then there would be this wall of darkness that would begin to grow on the horizon. And that wall of darkness would be all these enormous ice chunks that are basically flying up into space. Okay? It would just look like a wall of weird dark stuff, and it would look like it was getting closer, but it's actually just getting really tall. Okay? So it would look like the sky is being covered by darkness, but it's just this. It's all these huge ice chunks being thrown up into space.
Wow.
Then the shock waves in the ground would arrive. Okay, he said they would be traveling at like 5 kilometers per second in the ground. So they're like all these seismic waves, and then these ice chunks would begin to start falling back down to Earth. Okay. And you would see, like anybody on the ground would see that as would develop these white streaks, as the ice begins to fall back down and is hitting the atmosphere
Yeah.
again. And then they start to hit the ground. And each impact that hits the ground sends more seismic waves through the ground, traveling between 5 to 8 kilometers per second. And there's so many of them all over the place that the ground is vibrating so much that it becomes liquid. It liquefies the ground. And so that everywhere becomes like quicksand. No, you can't run anymore.
Shit.
So everything within thousands and thousands of miles around this becomes trapped by the ground liquefying from all these impacts and all the shock waves traveling through the ground. So now everything's stuck.
So that's how you get like entire forests that are just
sunk down into the
Yeah, an entire forest is completely surrounded by sediment.
Yeah.
And it's petrified, and all the
Right.
trees are still standing.
Yeah. The ground just turns into quicksand and they just sink if they don't get hit. He was also saying that so that's happening and basically
And then it starts raining.
yeah, huge raindrops too.
Because so the turning a solid into a gas, skipping the liquid state, is called sublimation. So the intense heat of all that could just be it's just instantly vaporizing ice, and then that's gonna rain.
And some of the ice, some of the ice chunks would have been by the time they reach the ground, they would be enormous droplets, like enormous ones, like like Olympic sized.
Someone just dropped a pool on you.
Like Olympic sized pools and larger,
which would flatten you.
He was saying baseball stadium sized chunks of ice are coming down, and that would be the average size. So that's enormous. That's a huge piece of ice, and so that's what makes the Carolina Bays. These ice, so the ground liquefies, becomes this sort of weird vibrating liquid mud, and then these chunks of ice are coming down and impacting into it. And they make these deep conical depressions, but then the waves go out from it, and then all the vibration makes it fill itself in and becomes this nice oval.
Yeah.
All right, and then once the vibration stops, whatever, the ground hardens again pretty quickly, and so then it becomes frozen like that. Okay, but he was saying that so oblique impacts cause a butterfly pattern of ejecta. Okay, unlike a regular crater, unlike a regular crater which throws stuff everywhere in every direction.
This one would have like a little bit in front, but mainly things off to the side.
Think of a car when you're driving your car and you hit a big puddle of water. It goes boosh.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what it does.
You get a little spray on your front windshield if you're going fast enough.
Turn on your windshield wipers. Yeah. So that's why these bays are all up and down the eastern seaboard, but that implies that the same distance from the Saginaw Bay to the west, there's going to be a bunch of them over there.
So it says they stretch from Delaware to to northern Florida.
Yeah, Delaware to northern Florida, terms land formations, I believe they're called basins. No. yeah, they're basins. Well, they don't. There's not an accepted name for them because everybody's arguing about what they are. So.
Yeah.
But so there should be the same amount of impacts happen to the west of Saginaw Bay. Right? So we have all these impacts because it makes this butterfly pattern. So a bunch of them went over here and landed east, all up and down the east coast. But the same amount should have gone over the west.
The impact came in like more north to south then.
Yeah.
I see.
Like think of the
the Lake Michigan.
Yeah. Think of the Saginaw Bay is pointing kind of southwest.
Pointing south.
Yeah. So that was the direction of the impactor. It comes in, burning in like from way up north, and it skips off the ground right there, and then keeps going back out into space. And it sends these.
So what we have down there is the Dust Bowl.
Yeah. But he was talking about and you can find there,
which makes sense. Because, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if there was a 2-mile thick sheet of ice there, and that's like where it collapsed, causing like catastrophic collapse, then all of the water and everything would just be rushing down through that part of the United States, creating the Dust Bowl.
And that's why why the Great Lakes basins make sense. Like that was the heaviest, deepest, most central part of the glacier of the ice sheets, and where they had kind of dug in, because they're constantly moving, and so they had kind of and they really dug in right there, and then they just were melted on the spot.
Yeah.
So it leaves those deep depressions, but the ice chunks and everything that went west of the impact, some of them did leave bays, and you can see on a map. There's a few of them. They found them
whereabouts?
Up north, up in
Like Montana area.
Yeah, like Montana, some in Wyoming. There's just not very many out there, but
Okay.
because the coastline of the coastal plains of the Carolinas was just really perfect for having these indentations made.
Yeah.
Because it's real soft loam or whatever.
Like over there, you got the Rockies.
Right. So that's what he was saying. But so we don't have the impacts over there, but we know that they happen because it should be the same number roughly as what happened over
Yeah.
here. So he was describing. So what happens when an enormous baseball stadium sized chunk of ice comes down and hits something hard like a giant rock outcrop? Okay, he was like, this is really important. Those things come down and they would explosively shatter into shards that would then go flying out at supersonic speeds. So the thing comes down and
Splat. Like
it goes whoosh, and
Yeah.
he said anything within like a couple of miles of any impact like that would be shredded. Like the ice would just turn you into like shreds, and then he said it left this blanket of ice chunks that covered a large part of the United States and Canada. Okay, so like down there where there was no ice, where it was warm enough for there not to be ice, all of a sudden there's an enormous ice blanket cover of these shards of ice or whatever that then changed the albedo of Earth, begin reflecting light back out into space. Mm-hmm. So again, this impact is the one that causes the Younger Dryas. Right.
Oh, okay.
So you have all this
causes
you have catastrophic.
cooling.
Yeah, you have long drawn out period of warming that everything's retreating for over 10,000 years, and then suddenly there's these impacts that causes catastrophic warming and flooding. But then right after that, it slams everything back into an ice age that where the ice grows out.
Reglaciates and everything.
Yeah, almost all the way to the extent of the last glacial maximum, to where there
Right.
were. So that's he's saying this is part of that mechanism. The ice. All these huge shards of reflective ice get scattered all over the United States that reflects all the sunlight back. So not only do you have all this crap up in the atmosphere blocking sunlight, but what does make it through gets reflected back out.
Right.
So that causes the cooling cycle.
Which makes sense why here we lost so many species of
He said that
of
what
animal.
killed the megafauna were these secondary impacts.
Now, is that... So, but a lot of the megafauna were also destroyed in the subsequent... end, whatever the cataclysm.
The
causing
second
it.
one?
Yeah, the end of
Yeah.
the Younger Dryas, the end of the last ice age.
Right. That's true. Like the whole period.
So
of
it was like
the whole period of the Younger Dryas is considered to be catastrophic.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of the a lot of the species may have died out then, and then 1,000 years later or whatever.
Right.
The rest of them.
This initial impact, like mortally wounded their species.
Right.
Right. Crippled them or whatever. And then the conditions afterwards were impossible. Okay. There was what vegetation didn't like sink or get covered over burned. Okay. So there's no food for the herbivores. They all die out. Then all the predators die out because they don't have any food. I mean,
Yeah.
the conditions were impossible. The Clovis people are gone. It wipes them out too. So, and the small animals were the smaller they were, the more likely they were able to survive because they could hide. Like a mammoth can't go into a cave to avoid shit coming down from the sky. Like
Yeah.
But little mices and shit can go run into a cave. Marmots. But the enormous beavers, the Pleistocene lion, the short-faced cave bear, all those huge megafauna things, they can't hide. Their habitat is outdoors. Is outside. They can't hide from it. So
Yeah.
that's why most of them they died and killed all of them off. But not, I think, what was it? North America, the Americas lost like 70+% of their megafauna of all mammal species above 100 pounds.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, like that to have this.
But a lot of the mammoths lived through that, right? Because
Some of them presumably did, but it was like I said, it was a mortal. It was a death blow. to the
right.
species.
They were definitely hurt by that, and then
It didn't kill them all, but they were dead.
right.
Like
And
the
then-
conditions were such that like even if they didn't all die, they were already dead because there was no way for them to survive.
But the following cataclysm, like 1,000 years later, just finished them off.
Yeah, if there was anything left, it finished them off. Yeah, it's hard to tell on that one because that one was just massive floods. It
Yeah.
carried most everything out into the ocean. So we were talking about the problem with the muck and stuff in Alaska and Siberia, and like the how do you have, what kind of cataclysm can like take something like the mammoth is like, he's eating temperate flowers, like he's eating flowering plants which grow in temperate zones. Okay, so he's not, even though it's in Siberia, he's not in the Arctic, or at least the Siberia climate before this was not Arctic in nature, because he was
Right.
eating flowering temperate plants, right? He had them in his mouth and in his stomach. So something takes that mammoth in this temperate zone where there's flowering plants and like shatters his tailbone, kills him by asphyxiation, and freezes him so quickly that none of the flowering plants in his belly or his mouth have time to putrefy.
Right.
And the idea that they were saying is like that means you have to have them frozen solid within 10 hours.
Right. And some physicist or whatever figured out like how cold it would have to
Right,
be.
minus 270 degrees or something like that, yeah. And it has to go to minus 270 as soon as he dies and stay that way until he's frozen, for 10 hours, until he's frozen solid.
Right.
That's, like, so what can cause that? Like,
I've heard like in isn't it true like in the eye of some storms like the
Yeah.
temperature could drop can be so drastic?
yeah, so if you have,
So okay, basically a vacuum can do that.
right, if you have an enormous global superstorm or whatever, they kind of showed this in Day After Tomorrow. The eyes of the hurricanes were so thick that they went up into the stratosphere where
Right.
the air was incredibly cold and pulled that straight down to the surface.
Right.
And so flash froze everything. But
But you can also get that with a vacuum. Like if you combine those forces,
yeah.
you're pulling a vacuum on something at the same time that you have other cooling effects,
So-
sunblock and all that.
We were talking about this weekend, and I had an idea that I was going to run by you. Like, we know that these impacts cause immense shockwaves. And what is a shockwave in the atmosphere but a gigantic compression and then rarefaction? So, like, what if the shockwaves is so intense that once, like, this huge thing of compressed air passes by, and then when it expands back out,
Right.
the temperature would drop crazily,
Right.
like, flash freeze it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? So like that's why he was killed by something slams him onto his haunches, right? Like his hips were shattered, and he was found in a sitting position. Like mammoths don't really sit, but he was like pushed back onto his butt basically, and his hip bones were like shattered into a million pieces. Like whatever caused him to sit down did it really hard.
Yeah.
Okay, but that didn't kill him. What kills him is asphyxiation. Okay, he dies by not being able to breathe.
Right.
So and then the freezing, all that together seems like shockwave to me, like something a shockwave.
Right. So if you have a vacuum, you've got asphyxiation and
Yeah.
freezing.
That's right. I'm talking about the expansion of the air with the shockwave pass is like the shockwave is so compressed,
Right.
and it goes woof, and goes past you, like, but the air behind it, like the air doesn't actually move.
Right. The air behind it is expanded, therefore a vacuum. It's
Yeah, and the cooling.
right.
Right. So I was just thinking that could be part of the mechanism.
I have to look up shockwaves too. I know they're a lot different than just like typical sound waves. There's something because they can travel way faster
Right.
than
Yeah.
sound.
But I'm just talking about like how, if you compress air and then you let it all out real quick, that air gets really fucking cold. It'll
Right.
make ice appear on your tank or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So like a shockwave is like that. It's really compressed, and the shockwave passes you, and then it decompresses.
Right.
So it could flash freeze you if the shockwave is intense enough.
Right. And typically if you have something highly compressed, you're going to have some equal and opposite decompression on the other side
Right.
of the wave of compression. But that's
Yeah.
what I was saying. I need to look into that. Like I haven't done a whole lot of research on shock waves because I know they're very different.
The other thing I
that's all
thought
I
of
know.
is like in Day After Tomorrow, they show that the big storms that are bringing the cold air down there as hurricanes, but I
Yeah.
think it's much more likely that they would be tornado, like cyclones. So like I think that a really large impact.
Yeah, because that requires very, very
right, it requires a whole
large
bunch of-
organization of
But like you can
motion.
get whirlpools from anything, right? So like a huge impact, just bam, and like the shockwave goes out and like it hits mountains and makes it go in weird directions, and then you get
Absolutely.
these gigantic
Turbulence.
tornadoes
All kinds of turbulence.
that go all the way up to the stratosphere and start pulling this super cooled air down. You know what I'm saying?
I can see that.
Is this a viable theory? Should we write it down and send it in?
Viable hypothesis.
Yeah. So the Alaskan muck. This has been
Also, real quick before we go there, like
Damn it,
you could
talk
get
about the muck.
you could get in some areas based on geological formations, pretty stable whirlpools like that.
Yeah.
Right. Like in certain areas. So in these areas where in the tundra or wherever where they're finding like all these animals.
Yeah.
Perhaps the impact, like you were saying, this shockwave, this explosion, all this crazy stuff causes like these sort of whirlpools, tornado like things that are very stable. They stay where they are for 10 hours.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
a couple of days maybe.
Yeah, just drilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lowering the air pressure and freezing the shit out of everything.
That's a good point. Yeah, so I was also looking into the muck because this is connected to this whole concept, and the idea is that large parts of Alaska, whole chunks of the Yukon in Canada, that like contiguous to Alaska, and then places in Siberia, have tundra ice. So tundra ice is like permanent, right? It never melts all the way, so it's it can melt a little bit, but it never completely melts away. Right, so basically it's building up all the time. It gets thicker and thicker and thicker. It's called tundra ice. But in this ice, and it can be 10, 20, 30 meters thick on top of the actual surface of the ground, okay? When they dig down into it, and they were doing this because during the gold rush period, they were doing the same deal with Tabletop Mountain. They would dig through the ice to get to the riverbeds down there, and then go along the riverbeds and find nuggets of gold.
Hell yeah.
Okay. But the ice is full of like animal parts and forests. Like, in other words, it's just like enormous splintered tree trunks and shit. All this vegetation, right? Ripped to shreds or whatever. And then like the disarticulated, dismembered pieces of animals, just fucking millions of them. Right. And the way the guy, the way the dude was describing it, he was like, it's like this whole area was mid cataclysm. Like there was enormous floods and shit going through, and it ripped up all the forests and grabbed all the animals and torn them all apart. And then something came and froze it solid, and it's still there.
Yeah.
Like he was saying that you can see that there will be like concentrations of material in the muck, like animal and vegetation material in the muck that show you where currents were. Like, in other words, it was frozen mid
motion.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's just crazy, dude. So we're coming up on a break here real quick, but I would like to get into this. I remember I don't know if it was with you. We were on a road trip somewhere, and we were like, "Wait a minute, frozen waterfall!" And we drove to this frozen waterfall.
Yeah, that was in Vermont.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was a beautiful
big ass cliff, and there's just
right.
It's frozen.
Yeah, this ice is trying to fall down this cliff and it's failing.
But of course that happens slowly, like from stalactites and stalagmites of ice.
It actually,
because
I was living there at the time, and I remember the waterfall during the summer is beautiful. It's just like, shh, And then one day you drive by, it's like, like, whoa, and then it gets bigger over time, but it freezes pretty quickly.
It's what I'm saying is it starts out as like this. Some of the water sticking to the cliff or whatever because it's so cold, freezes there, and it just slowly builds up and builds up and builds up.
Right.
And then the river upstream is also doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But this is like a totally different situation. Like,
it's like the river upstream gets flooded, fills up with people's houses and shit, and then something comes and freezes it down to the ground.
Yeah, it has to, in order for currents to still be visible in the depth of it has to freeze it very fast.
Right.
Because it would obviously, like typically it would freeze from the top down. Mm-hmm. So the current on the top, say 6 inches, the top 6 inches freezes in maybe one night or whatever.
But the shit beneath it keeps moving.
Yeah, it keeps moving. So the currents are going to change perhaps over time. I don't know.
But still, what lake do you know of that freezes all the way down to the bed?
I don't
Like
know.
usually once they get a certain amount of like the colder it is, the more ice there will be, right?
Right.
But still, that ice is an insulator in a sense for the water below it. Like Lake Vostok in Antarctica is a freshwater lake beneath 2 fucking miles of ice, and it's still water down there.
Yeah.
You know, like it's very rare where you. I mean, like if it would freeze all the way to the bottom, then there would be no life on Earth.
There could be that the tundra was. It got extremely cold there before the flooding came.
So that the freezing was happening from below.
Right.
Too?
So the ground was already frozen, like fucking way down below the freezing point of water. So then the water comes in and is freezing from the top and the bottom.
The hard thing about that is you have these mammoths like walking around eating temperate flowers right before it happens. That's what's hard about it, because that guy was stuck in tundra that was being cut away by a river.
That's what I'm saying. But you could technically you could freeze all the plants and the animals eating stuff, and then they could be inundated by a flood, and then all chopped into pieces and broken into pieces, shattered, and then frozen in currents. But still, I'm just saying it's insane amount of freezing that you know the temperature and pressure must have been ridiculously low.
And low pressure, like approaching a vacuum with water usually makes it boil,
Right.
which it agitates it, makes it less likely to freeze.
Right. I mean, it's
Not that really matters. I mean, it was all flowing anything. I mean, it was mid cataclysm. Like, I just think it's really,
right. But if it was highly viscous, so it has mud and muck all mixed
he did
in,
say
it
that
wouldn't boil as easily.
He did say that there's like tar and all kinds of other shit in there.
It wouldn't be able to boil as easy.
Yeah. And enormous lenses of ice he talked about.
Lenses.
Yeah. Like the ice would form in these huge lens shapes. Like flying saucer shapes, you know?
Man.
Because around it is like all this other stuff, like mud and, you know, and there would be this enormous lens of like actually like relatively clear ice.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then there are these, he said that there are deep.
Big raindrop. Somebody dropped a pool.
Yeah. Like there are these deep, like, I don't know, I can't remember what they're called. Like they're gorges or arroyos or whatever that were just where like tons and tons of enormous tree trunks were like splintered and just jammed in there. Right. So it's a deep canyon beneath all this ice, or whatever, that's freshly made. So it's like, it's not an old canyon. Like this was made during this cataclysm, right? It's freshly cut, and it's just like all these enormous tree trunks are just splintered and fragmented and just jammed down into this canyon and frozen solid there.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, like the scope of it is just
Serpents in the sky.
yeah, like all these descriptions
fucking
we
us
have
up.
where I'm telling you about like walls of giant ice chunks of, you know, the size of baseball stadiums. That's just like even that is that's just a piece of it. Like whatever caused this. You know, it has entire forests of trees and animals in there, and they're all ripped apart like it's like a blender.
Yeah.
Like the guy talks about how like when they're prospecting for the gold, they would take enormous dozers out there, right? So they're just on top of ice, and the dozer starts to make these passes going back and forth to sort of make a ramp down and then a ramp back up. So he'd start over here and he'd push down, and he'd like scraping the ice up or whatever, and then he'd push it up out and push it out. And they were saying that they were watching as the dozer's coming forward, and they're just seeing bones, huge, enormous bones, like coming up, you know, popping up out of the ground and folding in front of the dozer. But basically, he's just pushing mammoth bones, like enormous rib bones and shit. They're just, you know, that's what it just looked like they were folding up out of the ground like crazy, you know.
Snake bones?
There's probably some snake bones in there. Like 80% of the world's ivory trade is from Siberian ivory mines. How do you mine ivory unless you have a ground that's crammed full of it, you know?
Yeah. It's wild shit.
There are whole banks, like, you know, like sand, like what would be normally like a sand bank or whatever, like a sandbar in a river, you know, where the river turns and it like drops all this sand right here. They said that there's enormous sandbars in these rivers that are made just of bones of megafauna.
They're bone bars.
Yeah. Enormous bone bars.
And with that, we're going to take a break. We're going to go to a bone bar.
Bone bar sounds badass.
Get hammered on snake
some
drinks.
mammoth shots.
Mammoth shots at the bone bar. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Hailing from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. High atop the Edwards Plateau. We're talking about massive cataclysms destroying everything. And it's not terrifying at all. But whenever we talk about this kind of stuff, I always try to imagine, or I like to try to imagine what we would do today. And I don't necessarily mean we as like the whole world of humanity, but really just like, what would I do? Like, how would I deal with this? And I think years ago, like if I were to survive, right, the main devastation, to be one of the surviving peoples that remembered the old world. And before I started looking into this stuff with you, my ideas of surviving a cataclysm were just totally different. Like it was, I'm serious. It was just like, well, I'm pretty good at.
You have to know what a cataclysm really is.
Yeah. I'm pretty good at dealing with like the woods and just whatever, being outdoors and surviving stuff. Oh, hold on. I fucked you up. Oh, wait. There you go.
Did you turn me down because I was crunching ice?
You were crunching ice. I had to mute you. Like I was sorry about that.
Do you even crunch, bro?
I turned Russ's mic off while we were on break because he was crunching ice, and I was just like,
I can't take it.
Couldn't take it. But anyway, yeah, I just imagined like surviving without modern technology.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I could make a bow and arrow,
right,
and I could make a spear and sharpen a rock and whatever.
But when the ground liquefies beneath you.
No, I'm talking about surviving the devastation.
Yeah.
Like what would we do after?
Right.
But now I think about it in a totally different way after studying all these ancient sites, these massive civilizations that just vanished.
Yeah.
And what they left behind. And after, kind of starting to look at other possibilities than the standard model of we don't know, therefore tombs. And seeing the alignments with the stars, and then studying, basically all the star culture stuff.
Yeah.
The secrets that are hidden in the
star myths,
the stories of gods and all of that shit. Why can't I think? Astrology.
Yeah. Alchemy.
So the idea that if we were hit by something and something destroyed like all civilization as we know it today, and we were back to butt flaps, straight to butt flaps, comet or whatever hit us.
Yeah.
I think
It's a back to butt flaps event.
Yeah. I think of like, number one, like how would I describe this world to a new generation? They would not be able to perceive or to imagine the things that I'm describing to them because they would have no frame of reference.
We used to be able to travel to any other place on the planet within a day. We could talk to each other instantaneously from all over from anywhere.
Right,
in the world.
and then they would say, "Well, how did you do that?" Well, there's these things like radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what is that? And then you would have to know. You'd have to be able to give them, something to some frame of reference.
Metaphors.
Metaphors to be able to describe.
That's
like
why
how
all the old myths are full of metaphors.
So you could imagine that you might find like some natural magnetic material.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're showing some kid like, hey, check this out. Like this, see this thing sticks to this thing. And you'd have to have some other metals too. And you can say, well, there's actually some disturbance going on here, right? Between these two things. And so if I just push this thing past this thing enough, it causes a disturbance that's then,
it's
just
the
like,
hand of God.
Yeah. And we were able to do this in a very orderly fashion and then use some other magnets, and some other materials that would then take my voice.
Yeah.
And then sort of, oscillate that disturbance and then we could project it, and it goes at light speed. Well, what's that? You know, like it's
really fast.
it's like
Yeah, there's too many concepts that they wouldn't be able to.
like with a child today, when all of the technology is around them, they get used to using it, and so they have that frame of reference. Like they see how it's happening and how it works, and then you can go. The older they get, the more they can learn. You can go into more details of like how each little thing goes.
Yeah.
You know, but without any of the stuff to like show them and for them to deal with or take apart.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get that idea across? So
Texting. How do you describe texting?
I love that. I love thinking about that because to me, the most fascinating thing about all of this stuff with the cataclysms and the ancient sites is the idea that these ancient peoples were trying to pass on some knowledge that they had about their world, the world before the cataclysm.
Yeah.
The technology that they had before.
Have we talked about the project that they have to, they've got these enormous deep underground vaults where they store radioactive materials like
Yeah.
We've talked about that.
Yeah, with the symbols and stuff. Like, how do we
They have
communicate
these
to a
projects,
future society that
projects to put to
do
warn-
not touch this?
Yeah, the
don't go any
warnings.
further in this cave.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's just amazing to me, like they can't see how the ancients may have been doing the same thing. How do we communicate to future peoples that can't read our language?
yeah.
How do we put something in here to ensure that they can come and see this thing and understand what it's telling them to do?
Yeah. And yet we've got all these buildings all over the place where people gather like once a week or twice a week or sometimes 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And there's a main guy who's been studying all of this stuff, and he stands up there and he's like, "You should not do this,
Yeah.
and be careful of this because the destruction of the world." And everybody's
Right.
like, "Wow."
Yeah, that's right.
But
You're just reading old
Yeah.
like chemical warnings, bro.
And then they get home and you're like, we might be hit by a comet, and they're like, "Nah."
Oh my god, that's so crazy. Or they're like, yeah, we need to make these warnings for the future peoples or whatever. But then they're digging down into something it says like, do not go in here. This place is cursed, and you will definitely die. And they're like, it's the same deal.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, there's no message you can put in there that some future civilization in the sense that like ours is so far gone in the past that it's completely forgotten. Because that's what they're talking about. 40,000 years from now, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years from now, where the people who are living at that time don't even know that our civilization existed.
Right.
They're not going to be able to believe, at least going by evidence from us, they're not going to be able to believe
That they can't deal with it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or that it's even, they're going to think it's bullshit.
Right, exactly. The more clear the warning is, the more they're going to laugh at it.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, whatever.
And then they get into it, and then everybody in the project dies. But they're like, "Pfft,
Yeah, it's
that's
coincidence.
just natural.
Yeah. It's coincidence. There's no curse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing that really like gets my brain going, what I enjoy thinking about is trying to put myself in that situation and imagine like how would I pass on the knowledge that I inherited from that world that is no longer around. Like how, looking at what, like from that perspective, like that way of thinking, looking at ancient sites and trying to determine what was going on there. Like I will admit that when I first thought of that, I think you brought this up actually to me that about Göbekli Tepe, that it was like, sort of like a memorial or a warning
Yeah.
almost, and I was like, nah, like I didn't like that idea. But the more I thought about it and the more I learning about the cataclysm and all that kind of shit,
Yeah.
like thinking about that, and that there was the possibility of, an advanced civilization, technologically advanced, in what ways we don't really know,
Right.
but that they had sufficient scientific practice to learn real things about the universe.
Yeah.
And then trying to pass on like which ones, like you don't need to pass on that we had cell phones.
Right.
you need to pass on something more important, and what would be most important is like that we had the science today to know about what this destructive element was.
Right. You have to give them the first step of getting rid of quant stuff, which is the knowledge that is required to build the understanding that you need to come to the concept.
Right.
Yeah.
But also in that there is the concept that like this destroyed us.
Yeah.
Right. And so they whoever if this is true, like whoever did, if it's genius, like the way they make all these stories, the stories full of, you know, it's very personified. Like everything is personified.
Yeah.
There's like people that have attributes,
right,
and weapons and certain clothing and appearances that all correlate to some natural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And that the way all of these people interact in this great story that people want to write into songs and speak about on the around the campfire and, you know, tell it to the crowd from the top of the mountain. Like the way they all interact with each other is the way these natural forces interact with each other. And that it is going to affect us. And like the bottom line is that like the end is coming.
The end is nigh.
Right? Yeah, the end is coming, and prepare yourself. And so there's like all of these messages from our ancestors that are like, prepare yourself for the end.
Yeah.
Because it is coming. And then within the story are all these like numbers that correlate to astronomical shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you're just like, okay, wait, it doesn't have to be a big sign. Like,
Yeah.
So
The message basically is duck. And then all the numbers are telling you when to duck.
But they're also saying things like, you know, you need to achieve like the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Right. And in
Yeah.
order to do that, you need to act like this.
Yeah. You got to build bricks.
Right. So they're basically, you know, it would be like us like barely surviving the cataclysm later, and we're trying to figure out how to, okay, look, I'm going to die before we get back to this point.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody that we know our age that witnessed the world before is all going to die before we get back to that point.
Right.
So we need to somehow preserve this idea that like, okay, it starts out, we're just telling them like, okay, we used to know how to measure all the stars and stuff, and this is kind of how we did it.
Yeah.
And you got to keep watching the heavens all the time. And eventually your technology will become such that you will actually be able to legitimately do this. And you might be able to, if you all act and work together and like don't murder each other and don't turn to savages, you might get to the point to where you can go up into space and escape this pending doom.
Yeah. This
and
cyclical hammer.
Yeah. So thousands of years later, they're like, you know,
they're like, stop taking up that oil. It's bad.
No, I mean like, don't act like that, or you're a sinner. You're going to be in hell forever.
That's right. Yeah. What was it? The end of the Assassin's Creed thing did this really well, where they show him and he's got the book, right, and it says it's like do these things and ye shall be saved, right. And then like the book subtly changes and the guy's holding it up and there's like fire burning around. It's like, do these things or burn as a heretic, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's the same deal. You take these instructions on these instructions on building a civilization capable of surviving, you know, and then turn them into like totalitarian freaking strictures, right? Use them as an excuse to control.
Right. And that's like what we were talking about, I don't know, a couple episodes ago about the grand conspiracy, you know, to keep us all divided and all that.
Right.
You know, it doesn't even necessarily have to be that the people involved in the conspiracy know the truth. They're just using all of this powerful shit for their advantage.
They may not be aware of the wider conspiracy. Right. But they can still participate in it, yeah.
But yeah, I think
but there is a wider conspiracy. Shit's too coordinated for it to not be.
I just think it's a wonderful thing to contemplate on how would we do it, you know?
We'd die. The hard part really, I think to me, I'm always thinking about the odds, because like unless you're like Noah, you know, where somebody shows up and is like, hey bro, you need to build a boat. You're just going to be like one of the dudes that was like, what does it say in the Bible? They were eating and drinking and getting married, right? They were just doing the normal things.
Yeah.
You're going to be one of those guys eating or drinking or getting married. And then like, bam, suddenly you're dying. And like, and everybody else is too.
Right.
You know?
But it still doesn't mean it's not entertaining to think about the possibility of surviving and how to communicate.
It's definitely entertaining. Just like the idea, like to me, all this stuff points to the idea of like being a prepper is pointless because prepping implies that you can prep for that prepping will allow you to survive. But these cataclysms are so intense and so chaotic that you can't really say, okay, even if you knew what was going to happen, like there's going to be comets coming in and they're going to be hitting in these areas, you don't know which parts of the planet will be safe.
Right, but if you stow away some food and you stow away some like warm clothing, and you happen to be in one of the places where it just gets really fucking cold and a lot of your farming shit is frozen and dies, you've got some food and warm clothing, so you might be able to make it a little further.
Right, but that's yeah, no, absolutely right. But what the key I'm talking about right there is how you said you just happen to be.
Yeah. I mean, of course you can't
prep for this.
You can't prep to be on the side of the planet that doesn't get the impact.
But the side of the planet that doesn't get the impact gets everything else. Gets the days of darkness, gets the massive earthquakes, gets the tidal waves, right? That's what I'm saying. Once you throw in enormous tidal waves and gigantic volcanic eruptions and huge earthquakes, trying to figure out which part's going to be the safe haven is almost impossible.
Right.
So those people are just like they win the cataclysm lottery or whatever.
Right.
You know,
And if you
like
happen
Noah.
to be a prepper that wins the cataclysm lottery, you're in really good shape.
Yeah, you're in really good shape
compared to other people.
And then everybody else that's alive is going to come to steal your shit. Not really, because there'll be so few humans left on the planet at that point. I think like some of the flood stories you see that like it was thousands of years before these small groups of people who survived met another group of people.
Right. I'm not really thinking of in terms of like figuring out a way to survive it. My thing is figuring out a way, if I did survive it, how would I pass on the knowledge?
What would you do? Yeah.
How would I pass on the knowledge? That, like in what way? And obviously,
I just be like,
the
look,
ancients have a great template for how to do it.
Yeah, so that's what I'd just be like, look, like, just we need to keep passing this down. Like later on, look for pyramids because they already did it, right? I don't have to do it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know if they were destroyed or not, like
yeah.
They might have been wiped out too. So,
well, those things were made to last, but yeah, they probably got wiped out. That's another thing. I wonder how many things like that were here before these cataclysms, Like, are they also in like safe zones, roughly?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, there's those pyramids that are off the
Mexico
coast.
City just got nailed by a freaking earthquake.
Another one. Yeah, something's mad at Mexico City. It's because we're figuring out all this stuff about the tubes.
Yeah. Lava tubes.
It's reading our minds and like, nope, they're figuring it out. Destroy it right now. Like, there's that sunken city off of the coast of Cuba. Did you ever hear about that? It's like underneath. It's down. It's like beneath almost 2 miles of water. But they were basically doing deep soundings or whatever, and they found like pyramids and shit like way down there on the seabed underneath. And that's too deep for it to have been any kind of ice age flooding that submerged it. It's way below the surface. So like, how did that get there? Like what kind of cataclysm causes that? Where this whole cityscape with walls and like ziggurat type structures and shit is underneath 2 miles of water off the coast of Cuba. I guess it could be like some kind of geological collapse.
Seems like the city wouldn't. I mean, why would the city still be standing?
Still be intact, yeah.
I don't know.
It was like an elevator. The island was like. So, yeah. Did you have something you were going to talk about waves and these earthquakes and everything?
No.
No.
I was going to talk about what to do at the end of a cataclysm.
Okay, let's hear it. I wasn't trying to derail that. I was just talking about how like you can't prep for it. So like the idea of planning for it is impossible, but you can plan for if you did survive, what would you do afterwards? That's cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like how, like I like to think about how to pass on knowledge, right? In what way? Because like obviously, if you don't build shit out of stone, massive fucking things out of stone that, you know, I don't even know how they did that shit.
Right.
How would we do it without all of our modern tools? I don't know. So I, you know, that's kind of that's
why you just tell them to look for
somewhat out
pyramids.
of the question, right? But the oral traditions, and that's what Brett's saying this. Hence the oral tradition warnings, like the gods forbid us from going there, which no one takes seriously because the people telling them are wearing butt flaps.
That's right. You can't take any butt flap warnings seriously.
Yeah, but the oral traditions, like I'm kind of fascinated by that idea that was it a group of people that had this knowledge that got together? Was it one guy that was just like, I'm gonna turn all of this knowledge into a fucking badass story that everybody's gonna fucking tell forever?
Right.
Like how does this happen?
Yeah.
So that's what I like to think about. Like if we survived, we would need to tell a new story that also had the old story in it.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
Haven't-
upgraded with this cycle's information. Yeah.
right, exactly, in the best way that we could get it.
Yeah.
And so we would have to, because we don't already know like astronomy really kick ass. Like we've had the benefit of modern technology to aid us in astronomy.
Yeah.
But as soon as that shit's
Google.
gone,
Okay, Google.
right? As soon as that shit is gone, we're gonna be like, okay, damn it! I wish I would have memorized the freaking zodiacal constellations.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, there was like a scorpion.
So we'd have to make new ones, and we'd have to start studying that shit, and then try to pass that on. Like, okay, if I'm gonna die before I really get it all down, I'm trying to pass it on to the next generation. Like, this is what I remember about how to do it.
Yeah.
And you got to keep studying. This is so freaking important, right? And then at the same time, we would have to make a story. I mean, I guess we would be telling the story, but you'd have to tell it in a way that they could relate to.
Yeah.
Hence the parable. Like they need to be able to relate to it, even though while telling it that they can't really understand
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. And that part of what makes that fascinating is like, so you look at these stories or whatever of these like egalitarian / hunter-gatherer or whatever cultures, and they're telling the story about the creation story, you know, and there's this ancient hero god and he's got his hatchet, you know, or his spear or whatever. And like, so they're using tools that they recognize.
Right.
And so you start thinking about like, which ones will we make? Like, what would our culture heroes look like from this modern civilization? Now, obviously you would be making in a post-cataclysm thing, you would be making it in context of what people had then. But the idea of like, what would this civilization stories look like if we were making the same kind?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. I love thinking about that shit.
Like instead of a hatchet, what would one of our guys have?
Yeah, so like you got to come up with
He's got his iPhone.
the sort of the Zeus with his lightning bolt sort of metaphor for the guy with his cell phone.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Like, what is he holding? It's a tablet.
Yeah, it's a tablet.
Right? It's a tablet of stone.
It's rooted. It's badass.
Oh, Brett says the city off the coast of Cuba covers 2 square miles under
2,000 feet of water.
2,000
okay.
feet of water.
Yeah. So yeah, but 2,000 feet of water is still like the at the end of the ice age, the water went up, the sea levels went up 400 feet. So 2,000 feet is too deep for that to be the cause of submersion.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. And of course, that's one of the ones where they detect it. There was all these news stories about it. They had these great images of the scans and everything like that, and then it just went away. Just went away. Nobody's ever looked at it again. Can't be there. We know it's not there because it can't.
So yeah, I can imagine like, you know, future like post cataclysm peoples from leftovers from our civilization passing on information about knowledge about cell phones and what they could do, and then like thousands
And
of
the
years
internet,
later,
too.
thousands of years later, they're like they're in the stone building, you know, and they've all got these little bricks in their hands, and they're like, you must go out into the sun in order to receive the signal.
That's right.
And then you can speak with the others.
Yeah, that's I figured out like that like totem poles. Totem poles to me are like an indication that the whatever this previous ancient like unknown advanced civilization was, they also had the internet and stuff. Because like if you think about it, like we're talking about, you're trying to describe to this kid post cataclysm that you used to post comments on the internet, right? Well, what's so like, you would post stuff you're trying to say to people, and then you end up with these posts with shit
with
on them.
different faces. Like one face is happy, and the other next guy's mad.
That's basically like the quant sup version of posting comments online.
Yeah.
That's what totem poles are.
The guy at the top has like the big grin because he's being sarcastic,
Right.
and then there's like
He's got all
3
the
faces
upvotes.
beneath him that are all pissed.
That's right. The guy at the top has got all the upvotes.
That's awesome.
Posting
I was just imagining
comments.
like the whole congregation like with their little bricks.
Yeah.
They go outside and they all start spinning around and raising it up high and looking at it.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
And then they in order to travel to, you know, different places, like they all go get into the little box. Like one guy gets in the front of the box and he puts his hands on this little ring, you know, and they're like,
puts the ring on,
he's gonna be the leader. He's holding the ring.
That's right.
He's taking us where we're gonna go.
That's right. Make sure everybody goes to the bathroom before you get in the box.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody wears a belt.
Everybody goes to the bathroom before they get in the box. You gotta go poopy?
That's
Make sure
right.
you go poopy before we get in the car.
Put your belts on.
Yeah. But still, it would be kind of a fun thing to really come up with that story, you know?
Yeah.
Like in the same way that the Greeks did with their gods, you know, and just but using so our modern understanding of say the physical laws or whatever, like take each one and then personify it.
Yeah.
Make a quote unquote deity out of it. And then all of the ways that thing interacts with other things have to correlate to the physical law. Make a story. That would be fucking cool.
I wonder if that would be a good sort of, not litmus test is the wrong term, but like a good test of how accurate or accurately descriptive any given theory or law is by like, can you even do that with it? If you can't do that with it, it's probably we've got something wrong in the theory.
That's an interesting.
Because like think about it, you got the ancients and like they're the way that they've got all this information hidden in the myths. It is personified, and it's easy. You can the attributes and everything are very easily understood. They're simple concepts to grasp, even though sometimes they're talking about very complex, like highly advanced scientific concepts.
Yeah.
And
the other thing that's mind-boggling is how many different aspects like one thing will have, and all this, and you're just like, what the fuck?
Like you look at those relief carvings on India where they've got like 48 arms and shit, and like every one of those is an attribute, you know?
Yeah.
So you got the deity, and like in each arm he's holding something else, some different thing or whatever, and each one of those objects is indicating some particular attribute or power.
Right.
You know?
And so one of the difficult things about that too is that the object that it's holding has to be
something that everybody can recognize.
Yeah. No matter the language, no matter.
So they usually are natural objects, like a lightning bolt, a seashell.
Right.
Yeah.
But then some of them, they may have like this sort of overt meaning or whatever, but the true nature of it is very subtle.
Right.
And so you would have to it's like the more developed you get technologically, the more you understand about the universe, the more sense those objects can make.
Yeah.
But they can still make sense even though all you understand is butt flap 101. You know?
Well, really, the more advanced you get, you begin to see the correlations in all these objects, and then you just skirt tart it. You just like, no, that's
true.
not what it is.
And that's another thing about all these myths, that they all warn about us becoming full of ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Blinded by our own hubris.
Yes, exactly. And it's
right.
like, pretty much like you could just put that header over top of this, you know, Scriptart page, web page.
There was a great
Scriptart page.
Yeah, there's
Blinded by hubris.
That's right. Blinded by your dumbass. There was a great, like, I was reading a compilation of different Native American or American Indian flood myths, then specifically focused on the pre-warning that people get, right? So like one of the common things of the story of this deluge that's global in scope is that somebody gets warned before it happens,
Right.
by some deity or right?
Yeah. The one guy looking at space.
Right. So the Native Americans, a lot of times the warning will be an eagle, or it's some kind of animal totem. You know what I mean? Like it'll be an enormous eagle, or it'll be the coyote or whatever is warning the seer, right? And like one of them was hilarious because it was like you could tell, like you're like, oh, this is the skirp derp, this is the skirp chart in the Indians, because like the seer's like chilling out, and he's smoking his pipe. And the eagle's landed there, and the eagle's like, no, I'm serious. Like, it's this wall of water is going to come down the valley. And the seer's like, whatever. It's not going to happen. and the eagle's like, no, I'm serious. You need to get your people, you need to tell them and get their people out of here. And the seer's like, that's never happened, and it's not going to happen. There aren't walls of water. It's bullshit. You're a stupid eagle. Right? And the eagle's like, finally he gets tired of it. And the eagle's like, well, you're a seer that doesn't see shit, right? And he just takes off, and then there's the wall of water coming. But it was hilarious. I was like,
Ancient
holy crap.
script arts.
Yeah. This like seer guy was like, wall of water. Get out of here, eagle. You don't even know anything about the ground. The eagle's like, you're a seer that doesn't see shit.
That's great.
Yep. So they had to deal with
like that sounds familiar. There's the guy in the Noah story who's doing the same thing. Like he's coming up to Noah like, oh my God, what are you building a boat for, bro?
Yeah, like come on,
buddy.
You're turning your house into a boat? Have you noticed we're in a desert? Huh?
It's like, no, really, there's a big flood. Right. Okay.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. I got some beachfront
It's just a
property for you.
passing shower.
Even if there is an enormous flood, it's going to be local, okay? It's not going to be global. Come on. And it'll be because the land is going down, not because
not because the water is
rising.
So yeah, we need to work on. Well, I'm gonna be working on snake tails, right?
It's a good thing to work on.
Snake tails.
Somebody will survive. That's the thing, right? It's like the lottery. Like it's the odds of you actually winning are incredibly low, but someone always wins.
Right. So if we write the story now,
Yeah. That's
and
what
the
I'm
story
saying.
becomes global.
If we could do it as a sort of compilation project, like a bunch of people get in on it, and you put it all online, like here's what we would tell after the cataclysm, here's what you say,
Right.
here's how you do it, then somebody who didn't do any thinking about that but maybe saw it one day or whatever, and then they happen to be the one that survives. They're like, wait a minute, what did that website say? Oh yeah, okay, so it's like an eagle and shit. How did it go?
Snake tails, dude.
Yeah, snake tails. Post cataclysmic snake tails.
Yeah.
How to rebuild civilization in less than 10,000 years. All right. I think, is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
33.33.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kyle likes to think about that. My favorite thing really is to focus on how to become an out of place artifact. Because that'll do the same thing, right? Eventually they'll dig you up and they're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
And then
my snake tail will perfectly
That's right.
align with everything
this
that
guy's
you're
like,
wearing
but
and
look
what
at
you're
this
doing.
snake tail is talking about him having this.
And they're like, no.
Yeah.
No, it's not. This is
That's
just
That's right. They'll have all the same elements. There'll be people skirp derping it, and they'll try to suppress your snake tail because of the fact that it correlates with my out of place artifact skull
Right.
or whatever.
Yep. Yep. And then a group of people that look like you will be like, that's our body. And they'll take it and then they'll
That's
burn
right.
it.
That's our ancestor. We're gonna cover it in concrete. You can look at it for 5 minutes and give it back. Yep. Swapping out teeth. All right. Well, that was good. Episode 24. And if you guys want to comment, you can go to the blog at brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. You can email us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. And please go to iTunes or to Google Play and give us good reviews. Like, this is really important in the beginning stages of any podcast. Like, having good reviews on there is incredibly important to getting like people that we don't know to listen to the podcast. Like they're much more likely to like give it a shot if there's some people on there giving it good reviews. Like it's really important for the beginning.
Yeah. So basically, if you're someone we know, it's because we haven't had good reviews yet. If you're someone we don't know, then we've had good reviews.
Yeah, that's right. Or if you're someone we don't know and you didn't see any good reviews, go give us some good reviews and help us out, okay? You can talk shit to us on the blog, but tell everybody we're badass on iTunes. And I want to say thanks to Laura for the intros. Thanks to Aether Studios, AWAX Productions, Arcade Enterprises. Thanks to Brett for keeping us on the straight and narrow in terms of the truth. Making sure we're not lying here. Not wrong. And I think that's about it. Anybody else we need to thank? Smith Sonic plus more. Smith Sonic Studios for still not ever able to help us out with mics, but trying.
We can just shorten that to like, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody involved.
That's right. Well, I really want to come up with one of those like really fast like disclaimer things, you know, with all the like where you make it as fast as possible, like cutting out chunks of it. You know, we should make one of those.
All right, we can do that.
Make it really long. Give side effects for stuff, you know.
Snake credits.
Yeah, the listening to snake roast could possibly cause give side effects. Could possibly cause
Mental cataclysms.
Yeah, mental cataclysms, mind explosions, and loss of paying attention to the road and dying. All right.
Mind expansion by 30%.
That's it. We will see you guys next week for episode 25. Good night, Adamu.